Hello, and welcome to episode 138 of Killer POV. I'm your co-host, Rob G. from Blumhouse.com. With me is Mr. Elric Kane.
Hi, Rob.
Hi. That's it? You're not excited to see me? You're not excited for our guest today?
I'm psyched, man. I'm psyched.
You don't seem psyched.
He's just mellow.
I mean, yeah, it's like I am.
Your child was in this filmmaker's
That's
film.
a secret. That's a secret
No,
that will be revealed
is it?
on air. No, it
Will it? Will she remember you? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. If
My
she'll
bet
remember.
is no until you mention it.
I'm guessing no.
And he probably won't be in the cut, right?
So forgettable, Kane.
Elric Kane,
That's me.
Inside Horror.
That's it? Yeah. God.
Your resume.
I'm like Obi-Wan Kenobi. And that's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Yep.
You could go old school and say This Week in Horror for those.
This Week in
Oh, yeah.
Horror.
People like Dick Gruner
For
will
the
remember
beginning.
that. For the beginners.
Also with us, Rebekah McKendry. How are
What's
you?
up? How's it going, guys?
Editor-in-Chief.
You're still here?
Yeah. I
Fangoria.
am.
She's still here.
I've had a lot of
You're
Benadryl,
still
so barely. But yeah.
Becca
She showed
just-
us how to...
Yeah, I just want you to know how much Becca goes through for this show. So she's on her way here, and not only did she have an allergic reaction to something, which she took drugs for, but as soon as she got here, she told me, Elric, I'm going to show you how to give me a shot in case I'm about to die.
Yeah.
Yeah. Multiple things. There's
Because I
multiple
never know
steps.
how
We
bad
were like,
they're going to
"Wait,
get.
Okay, so we got to give you these pills, and then Elric's like, oh, so then we stab you in the
They're
chest.
not
with-
pills, gents. They dissolve on my
Oh,
tongue.
okay, they
and
dissolve.
don't stab.
We have to break...
But I saw Pulp Fiction. We
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
break
Right
the
there,
heart
yeah.
plate,
No,
right?
don't worry about the heart plate. Just go for the thigh.
The thigh.
So
Okay, all right,
I have
I got
food.
it.
I have some unusual food allergies, and I mean, I know not to eat the things that I'm
Unusual.
allergic to. But sometimes you're just like eating the most normal thing, like I'm eating like a cheese sandwich, and all of a sudden I'll start having an allergic reaction. Obviously, if I knew it had anything I'm allergic to in it, I wouldn't have eaten it. So it's usually just like cross contamination, or the guy who used the ATM machine before me was eating a Reese's peanut butter cup at the same time, and then I eat something and touch it to my mouth. And
That's horror.
I
Pure
know,
horror.
right? So, and you never know how bad the reaction. Like sometimes, like my lips will swell up huge, but nothing else happens, and then I don't even have to take medicine. And then other times, like my throat swells shut in like 5 minutes. So
You seem all right.
I'm great now.
So
I'm
let's-
on a lot of Benadryl, so I'm kind of loopy.
right, let's hope this
but
lasts.
I'm great.
The annoying part is after she died, Rob's like, let's bring her back. I'm like, we have to wait 49 seconds. I've seen Flatliners. We are going to break the
I have
thing.
to see a small child jump roping and my dad doing
There's gonna be some
heroin,
bullying.
and then I can
And then
come
we can bring her
back,
back.
guys.
Really, I was waiting till you'd see Baldwin with all those hot girls
Oh,
in the,
yeah.
in the
Which one was that?
videos.
William Baldwin? I can't
That is
remember.
the
Yeah.
sexy Baldwin. Back then, he was the sexy guy from
Right.
Sliver. I think that's William.
Oliver
Billy Baldwin.
Platt.
yeah.
Just not Daniel.
Platt
Never
got
Daniel.
totally shafted in that because Oliver Platt played Steckel.
He's
He
great
was-
in it.
I know, but he was the only one who didn't get to go back and see cool shit.
Oh, he
And
never
I
has a
was-
story,
No,
huh?
he never got to go back, and I always wanted to see like what would he see because
gotta
he's
revisit
very
Flatliners.
undefined.
I loved
love
it.
that
I saw it
movie.
recently. I still loved it, but it had definitely dated.
Aged?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just the way it's shot. It's the Schumacher effect, like the green saturation.
Right. Because I must have been like 16 when that movie came out. I
Yeah.
saw it twice in theaters. I
It was
so in love with
awesome when
as
it
a
came
kid.
out, though.
Yeah, yeah,
I remember being
But-
very disturbed by the bullying one. But
Yeah,
Kevin Bacon's
Kevin
story was
Bacon.
very disturbing. you
But
know?
Sutherland.
Kiefer Sutherland.
Oh,
Well, they
yeah.
were both
Well,
Bacon.
what was
Or
Bacon's?
they were
No,
both
Bacon's was bullying,
They
wasn't
were
it?
both bullying because Bacon was bullying the little African American
Yeah, that's
girl,
one that
and then
yeah.
Kiefer Sutherland
Was
was
being
bullying
Had the bully.
No,
Had the bully
Kiefer
coming for him,
Sutherland
yeah.
Oh.
had the bully coming after.
The
No,
kid who
was
was
bullying
bullied was
somebody.
coming back.
I
Yeah.
got
Yeah,
you. Okay.
and they pushed him out of a tree and he died.
And he
But
killed
We totally
all
know
of the-
Flatliners.
Yeah, all the characters
do.
in that were completely defined, but because when it starts, you don't know anything about him. Like Julia Roberts' character is pretty blank. You get that Kiefer Sutherland has a crush on her, but that's about it. And they aren't defined until you see their nightmares
Till their
that are coming
backgrounds,
back
yeah.
for them.
And it
But-
opens with, today's a good day to die.
Yeah,
I haven't
But
seen
Steckel,
Lazarus Effect.
He
Maybe
never
we
gets
should.
anything.
Well, you know what?
I've never saw Lazarus
I have it, and I was going to do one of my double takes was going to be Flatliners and Lazarus
I think that's a
Effect.
smart one to
good
do.
one,
I'd love
yeah.
to
Because
know.
I'm curious. Yeah. You
Like,
want
I'm
to come
curious.
over and join me
Yeah,
for
I
it.
was curious
Yeah,
to
we'll
see Lazarus Effect. It didn't get overwhelming praise,
Positive.
but
Yeah,
you
but
never
yeah,
know.
you
And
never
in
know.
context,
Yeah.
with Flatliners, maybe
Sure,
it's good.
sure. So first and foremost, thank you all very much for all your tremendous feedback, like overwhelmingly for the debates episode.
Debates.
The
debates.
debates.
Yeah.
So we didn't get superly drunk, but we did drink everything that was here. That's
true.
number one. But I really think that was like the most. That was the most like diplomatic and intellectual debates we could have possibly had. Like nobody was like cursing each other out. Like we kind of got.
I
to,
just
like,
love the silence that came after she said, Paula said
Reanimator?
reanimator. And it's just like this dark void of silence we all fell into. No one knew
I
what
don't
to
know
say.
how to respond to
Yeah,
It's
this.
just like, and then
All right,
when
let's
Texas
just-
Chainsaw Massacre, we were all like, okay.
All right, let's just move past this.
But it was fun,
Impossible.
and her love of Time Cop was cool because it
Yes,
makes me
Time Cop.
want to rewatch Time
Me
Cop.
too.
Yeah.
But no, we're really thankful. We really appreciate that you guys enjoyed it so much. And then we opened it up both on the Facebook, both to what you think is overrated, which is amazing. You know,
yeah,
I just
had to
kind
fight
of
for so many.
I
on
know.
there.
I was just
couldn't
kind of
help
looking at it like, oh, that's interesting. But Kane was fighting for Kubrick.
I usually don't
anything
even-
Kubrick and Kane gets his dander up.
Ryan Rawlings, I know you're listening, and you said that the difference between Cassavetes, he said Kubrick hates actors. He doesn't hate them; he's disinterested in them. So he's trying to use them as part
There's
of
a
cinema.
difference.
The Kane is riled.
Actors are just one part of cinema, right? There's camera, and there's
my God.
so he's just saying
Oh,
they're just
man.
part of it, and so you just say, so he's interested in ideas.
In other words, Ryan, you're probably not going to like Elric Kane films.
Ryan
Just saying.
Kubrick is. How could you like Under the Skin if you didn't like Kubrick, for instance? Let me just put it that way.
But what really cool was when I opened it up for underrated.
Yeah, that was really good.
There, even between the three of us, there were still some titles. I was like, "Ooh, I don't know that one. I don't know that
Yeah.
one." So
Actually, I got to write some. I go through it and write.
Yeah,
down.
yeah. So thank you guys, because now we have a couple of new ones that we will seek out.
And if you are listening to this right now and didn't know we'd posted that, go back to it and keep
yeah,
the
it's on our
thread
Facebook.
going.
Yeah,
'Cause
absolutely.
it's fun, especially underrated. You'll never get you'll never get sick of feeling what people actually get excited or turned on by.
Right, exactly. So social media wise, obviously we're on Facebook as facebook.com/killerpov. Same thing for Twitter, twitter.com/killerpov. All of us are very active there, so definitely find us. And we are also on iTunes.
And we're not on Instagram, but you could hashtag KillerPOV, and we often do when we
Check
take
it.
some.
Yeah,
So-
yeah. If you can, go and rate and review us on iTunes. I was actually surprised after the thing we mentioned. A bunch of people jumped on there, and we really appreciate it. So thank you for that. Last plug before we jump into things that we have seen. A few episodes ago, we had Brian Collins on, who a friend of the show, been on several times. He did a book version of Horror Movie a Day. And at the time, a lot of people asked for a physical copy because at the time it was only digital. The physical copy is here, and it is available right now on Amazon.
Cool.
I already bought it. It's great. It's a nice, thick, hefty book. It looks great. So for anyone that asked about the physical, check it out. You can get it on Amazon. If anyone's in LA, he's going to be signing it at Dark Delicacies on Saturday, April 30th.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
And even if you're not in town and you want to just get him to sign it, which he's like, nobody wants my autograph. But if you do, you can even buy it from Dark Dells at their website and have him sign it, and they'll ship it out to you after the signing. So just a shout out to Brian and his book.
I was at Dark Dells just before the show.
Were you?
I bought something called Carrion Comfort by Dan Simmons, and I'd heard, I think in one of our literary ones, somebody had mentioned it's one of the best horror books, but it's huge. It's like 700 pages, so God knows when I'll read it. But I was excited to finally had it.
That's exciting. I just picked up the Psycho Sanitarium by Chet Williamson. This is it's fully authorized by the Robert Bloch estate because Robert Bloch wrote Psycho, and then he did two sequels, Psycho 2 and Psycho House. Much like the movies, Psycho 2 takes place about 22 years later. So this is an official sequel that takes place immediately after the events of Psycho.
Weird.
When Norman first gets to the sanitarium.
How recent is that?
What do you mean?
Is this a recent book?
It comes out Tuesday. It comes out this week. Yeah.
How interesting.
So I picked up a copy of it, and I just started. It's pretty interesting.
Huh.
I think it's fascinating because literally they have just gotten to Norman and sanitarium stuff in the Bates Hotel TV show.
Yeah.
So it's like just by sheer coincidence, they're kind of like tapping into exactly what this book is kind of touching into. And that's the thing, is it at some point has to line up with Bloch's Psycho 2. So it's like it takes place in between the two Bloch books. So it's really fascinating. But yeah, it's just cool that there's a new Psycho book and it's totally authorized by the Bloch estate. So
I look forward to Gus Van Sant's adaptation.
yeah, try it page for page.
with Vince
adaptation.
Vaughn. Imagine him now playing that role. He's so puffy.
It'd be amazing.
It wouldn't work.
He's puffy.
So I saw some stuff this week. We've all seen some stuff. Who wants to go first?
Yeah.
I'll tell you some TV.
Shoot it out. Do it.
Let's
Yeah,
start with Salem season 2. This is something that I know I was really like chomping at the bit for, kind of getting annoyed that there weren't any rumblings about it. Like once we had Adam Simon on our show, which was one of our favorites, and that's just after I finished season 1. It was impossible to see this. It wasn't streaming anywhere. It wasn't on DVD or Blu-ray. Still isn't, as far as I know, on DVD, Blu-ray. Finally, last week, it
popped up on Netflix.
It popped up on Netflix.
Yeah.
So if you're on Netflix waiting, and I'm a couple episodes in, and already it's getting really good. I can see what he means, like instantly Lovecraftian.
Cool.
So that's been fun. Let's talk about the walk. We don't have to waste time time on it, but the Walking Dead cliffhanger, upset a lot of people. But let's talk about the positive, which is Negan looks like a complete badass, completely
Jeffrey
nailed the
Dean
casting.
Morgan is great. He's so good.
And it's so, here's my thing. That show's given me so many years of entertainment, and that was one of the best episodes they ever did. So it's hard for me to let that overshadow. Like, yes, it's a gimmick. It's a marketing ploy to keep people hanging on. Do they need to? No, because enough people watch it. So I think it's a bit of a mistake, especially if they know who really dies.
Right.
If they don't, then God knows that's not a good sign. But I'm sure they do.
Bekah, are you in the dark about this? Have you seen it?
I stopped watching a couple seasons ago.
We're not going to spoil it.
I've been editing pieces on it all week.
If
but
you even have the internet, you already know as much as we're saying. We're not going to tell you.
Well, that's the beautiful thing is that I love that for a change, no one can spoil it. So for that regard, I really love it because it's like, well, too bad you can't spoil it. Because
even the cast doesn't know. The cast, like you're literally Glenn and Daryl and all these guys could literally be walking around streets going, for all I know, I'm already dead, but I don't know it.
But that's kind of fun. And it's funny because again, we've been doing a lot of people have strong opinions about this, and we've been doing a lot of pieces on Blumhouse.com all week long. I chimed in, and I never write about Walking Dead, but I was just compelled because for a couple of reasons. One, because of how things happen in the comic books, and I'm a big comic book fan, and I'm curious where they're going to deviate or stick with the source material. But more importantly, I think it's, I was kind of upset. Like, I understand why people are upset because you feel like you've invested in all this. But then when I heard the writers talk about it, it all meant a lot of logical sense.
Especially Kirkman.
Yeah.
Who is the guy? And he also talked about his love of cliffhangers.
Yeah.
Like, this is saying to, keep you, same with a comic. It ends, and you don't know, and you have to wait for that month. Now, this is quite a long time in movies. I think what it's more reflective of is the way we're now used to watching media,
instantly,
watching all the episodes at once, and then hoping.
Well, that's the thing. Like in the '80s, whatever. It's like who shot Jr. or who killed Laura Palmer. These are things that you had to wait a long time for. You didn't even know if they were going to be resolved.
Even Breaking Bad season 3, no one believes me, but it did. It ended with him holding a gun on the guy. Anyway.
Yeah, and season 4 when we're not going to spoil it.
But do I think it would be better if they had ended this episode by showing you and having that emotional gasp? I really do.
Yes,
I think that's a better episode. That said, I think it's the best episode they ever shot up until that moment. I think just in terms of
Nicotero again.
Nicotero keeping you on the edge, interesting zombies, and then this character walks in and he's like, you couldn't have played him out better.
Also, you know what? I thought the way they did it was so horrific that I was almost like, you know what? I'm almost glad I didn't. I think this will mentally prepare us because
maybe that's it,
here's the thing: the showrunner was on Talking Dead or whatever and said essentially that you're missing the point. The season was not about leading up to your death. The season was about Rick and everything we've known all up until now, thinking that he had complete control and confidence, and then realizing in 1 minute that he doesn't at all.
Yeah, it's over if he wants it. Yeah,
it's the rise and fall of a character's ego and confidence.
Yeah.
And so when you look at it that way...
And that the death is the next storyline.
Exactly. And the death is they promise that when they kick off the new season, that's the whole season's going to be about the repercussions of it. So... Yeah. Whatever, man. There's a freaking zombie show on TV
without
that's
spoilers,
super popular.
There's a bunch of characters that are up for grabs. Without spoilers, I'm going to say that my belief, so we can come back to this later and know I was right, is they will go with the one that has the emotional impact of the ones you're thinking of, and they will be sticking very closely to source material is my absolute gut belief now.
I believe it's going to be the comic one, too.
I think because it has emotional impact, there's a lot of other characters who wouldn't have that same emotional impact.
Yeah.
And I think they need it.
And if they don't do one of those two, then it's a jip.
and if they do one certain character, the entire internet and,
riot?
and all of Japan will burn. Japanese girls will destroy, and Harley sales will plummet. Without further ado,
enough on Walking Dead. Sorry about that, guys, but me and Elric were excited.
I liked it.
Doodling in the corner. You'll catch up eventually.
It's okay, guys. I'll tune back in now.
So when we were talking about our kids' My Little Pony,
all right, what did you see cinematically, man? I got a lot of stuff I want to throw out.
Well, I saw last night. I saw a movie called The Invitation, and I'm not going to go into it too much.
We had somebody to talk to about
exactly. I will say this: I think it's a very smart, very emotional-driven horror film. Very rare. Out now. It's a little bit Don't Look Now mixed with something that just keeps turning the screws on you.
That.
I think people are going to dig it. Really cool soundtrack. It's a really smart little movie. And I'm excited to be able to talk about that in a few minutes.
Cool.
But I won't go any further. And then I saw only one other movie, and it's an interesting one. I will thank one of our, I think it's Sweden or Norway. God, sorry guys. I believe it was Newt Andre or one of the two of you who always comments. It was a movie called.
Right.
I know.
Jeez,
They Look Like People.
So racist.
It's a New York indie, and when I say indie, I mean micro budget.
I saw
horror.
that pop up on my recommendations list
it's on Netflix.
Amazon.
It's probably more one that people would make sense to not necessarily be one you pay for. Maybe wait for Netflix because it's so micro, you might feel it's not
Is it
your
on
bag.
Netflix or no?
Not yet.
It's on Amazon.
I'd say I started with Dick Gruner. If you've seen the movie Take Shelter, Jeff Nichols has a new movie in theaters. What's this? The one with the kid, Black Ride, the Rider, Midnight Rider. Believe is the name of it. It's the one with the kind of superhero twist to the kid and Michael Shannon. And all that. I think he's one of the best emerging filmmakers in America. But Take Shelter, I love. So it's this kind of theme of someone who thinks they're kind of seeing paranoid that people around him, some of them are not human, maybe something else, but it's done so minimally, and the acting's very realistic. It's very micro, and there's only probably 3 or 4 horror moments in an otherwise very minimal acting thing. So now, if that's not your bag, don't watch it and complain to me. But if you do like maybe I could almost imagine that this could have been something like Fessenden World, where
right.
But the couple moments where it never was going to give you the 100% kind of that thing. But the couple of times where it shows you a little hint of what he's seeing, at least. So he's either schizophrenic paranoia or we're really seeing an invasion of horror, and those moments are really effective. Me and Dick both felt maybe the final moments didn't give, like, you're hoping for it that big, and it just maybe falls tiny short. The director's name is Perry Blackshear. He wrote, acted, he didn't act, wrote, directed, produced, and like did everything. That's probably why it's when I say micro, I don't mean like a couple 100,000. I mean maybe it looks like 20 grand or something.
Wow.
But the acting's really good, and I had really had something burning away in there, and we dug it. But yeah, just sometimes it's hard. They can fall a little short of the big ideas it's playing with, I guess.
Right.
But there's a couple really cool horror moments in it, effective. So if you're into wanting to make like an indie, super low budget horror, a good one to go look at.
Yeah. Cool.
Nice.
I dug it.
Bekah?
Nice. I'll start by saying on Saturday I was at Days of the Dead and met some absolutely awesome Killer POV fans there. It's weird to walk through a convention and have people come up and be like, "Oh my God, you're Bekah," and it's even weirder than have them say, "Oh, and this is Marnie." Like everyone knows the name.
They know your children.
My kid because of the show.
Have a switch at New Bev, which is fun.
Yeah, it's awesome, and kind of like, oh wow, I guess I do talk about her a lot, but it's awesome because these people were just so wonderful, and everyone asked where the hell you two were.
Well,
so next time you got to come to the convention with me.
I hate
Monsterpalooza, couple
Listen,
weekends.
Illusion, we're not real.
Monsterpalooza
We're not real friends outside of this.
yeah.
We're just in the room. No.
What?
I think we have a photo of us at your house.
I know. I think we hung out and had
that's
beers
right.
on
We were
Sunday.
Yeah, we were at your daughter's birthday.
Yeah,
That's right.
so,
yeah, but Monsterpalooza, I think we're all going to that, right?
Yeah, that's in a couple of weekends. Rob and I are.
No. I'm not on the panel. You're on the panel
I'm
with
on the
Ryan
panel.
Turek.
You're moderating.
No, I'm not. I'm not doing anything with the panel at all.
Oh, why am I
There's
so
a Blumhouse
confused?
panel that you and Ryan are on. There's a movie that I acted in
That is
called
screening
Dry
there.
Blood, and it's screening that Friday
And
night.
I met that gentleman at Days of the Dead this past
Oh, cool.
weekend.
Clint Carney?
Oh, wait.
Or
No.
Kelton?
Kelton. Somebody else who worked on
Kelton
the film.
Jones is the director of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little indie movie we shot last year that I forgot about, and I had a bit part, which apparently, I don't know. We'll see. We'll talk more about it when it's relevant.
Awesome. So yeah, for anybody who was at Days of the Dead, it was a blast. Thanks for coming up and saying hi. And if you are fans, we love talking to you at conventions, so please come up and say hi. It kind of warms our hearts. So things that I watched this week. This one is small in the horror scope, but I recommend the whole series. I've been watching Documentary Now, which is now streaming on Netflix, and it's
I've heard funny things about
one of the guys from
Saturday Night Live and Portlandia.
It's the two guys, one guy
Bill
from Saturday
Hader.
Night Live and one guy from Portlandia. And what they do is they make mock versions of well-known documentaries. So they did like A Thin Blue Line. They did Grey Gardens. They did one that's obviously like a behind the musics thing.
Yeah.
And they're all of the ones I've seen so far are pretty good. But the one that I have to recommend for horror fans is the Grey Gardens one, which is called like White Sands or something like that. But you can see from the picture that it's clearly like a Grey Gardens rip. It is, and I know that it's supposed to be funny, but it is one of the greatest horror things I have seen in a really long time, all in a half an hour. And if you've seen Grey Gardens, it's exactly where you expected Grey Gardens to go at some point, but it never went there. And the way that this gets there is very smart. So even if you don't watch the entire series or you're not too into documentaries, if you have seen Grey Gardens and like horror movies, this is like an awesome one.
Shut-ins,
And John Humphrey apparently put this on like one of his lists from last year as being like one of the best horror segments. And again, I don't think that these guys were particularly like, we love horror and so we're doing this. They may have been actually, because it does have a lot of nuances to it that I think it's smart. I love it.
Okay.
So then I watched Torso.
Hey, I love Torso.
I know. Dave and I were
Blu-ray?
we got it streaming off Amazon, which I wouldn't recommend because the resolution was meh. But we could see it. But we were at dinner one night arguing over what our favorite Giallo films were, and then I texted Elric hoping that he would end the battle.
You said something like, tell me 3 quickly off the top of your head.
Yeah.
Just 3. You didn't even say best. You just said 3 Giallos off the top of the first ones you think of or something.
Yeah, I was
Torso?
like, I think I
Strange
said,
Vice, Miss Ward, Torso, and what else did I say?
you said All the Colors of the Dark.
Something like that. These were just...
Yeah, and I said non-Argento because they have to, everyone's immediately going to
yeah.
go with Argento. So it had to be non-Argento ones. So since we'd been having this argument at dinner when we got home, we were like, fuck it, let's watch Torso. Because it was on the list that Elric sent over and I had not seen it in forever. And that movie, it's fun. It's very meandering. But then most
A lot of them
Giallos are. And
They
that
are,
was kind of my
but
conclusion.
It's got the greatest shift for whatever the last 20 minutes. or whatever it
Exactly.
is.
And that's
where then it becomes a really solid thriller, and you're like, holy shit! How did that happen?
It gets so Hitchcockian in the last 20 minutes with a completely different plot than the entire first half of the movie because it's pretty much like a straight Giallo slasher.
Yeah.
And then in the last 20 minutes, it just becomes this taut Hitchcockian thriller.
I think that's what makes it stand out, right?
Yeah.
It's just it's because it could just be another Giallo, but then it's got this amazing conclusion.
Yeah.
They're weird fucking movies
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah,
If you really look closely at the ones you like or whatever, non-Argento ones especially, they're really strange plots.
Yeah.
Really strange sexuality. Like the
Yeah.
people have weird fetishes.
That
weird
was the one
obsessions,
that I was really confused by in the film and I was going to actually write an article for Blumhouse called 5 Things Girls Do in Torso That Girls Don't Actually Do.
Don't do it. Don't tell me.
I want to read that article. You should definitely do. I'll lend you the Blu-ray.
They do in
because
my mind.
Yeah.
There's extra stuff on it.
But the whole movie is about these sexy college co-eds and they're at their college all living together and having parties and then they go on vacation together. And there are things in there that I'm just like, who the fuck does that?
You know what's interesting about that is also
Italians? I don't know.
that's also a slasher setup more than a Giallo
yeah,
setup because we
yeah,
don't
for
usually
sure.
have college girls in Giallos.
I know
Most
you're
Giallos
stressed, Debbie. You should take your
Yeah.
top off and I'll give you a massage. Purely just friends massage.
that's weird.
Italian.
We'll see what
right?
happens.
Yeah,
they are.
Yeah. So there's just a whole bunch. So that article will be forthcoming. 5 things girls in Giallos do that girls don't
I
actually
think you
do.
should make that a weekly column where you look at any slasher movie and say 5 things from this movie that girls.
Well, girls just don't do.
I could do it in slasher films as a large thing because things like pillow fights at slumber parties. That is something
never
that you
happens?
see in tons of slasher films, not past the age of 6 or
Really?
7.
Shattering the illusion.
I don't know, Slumber Party Massacre. I'm pretty sure that's real. That was a documentary.
Totally happens.
Spankings does not happen after a certain.
Bullshit. Okay.
Yeah. So after Torso, Edge of Sanity, I did a video on the Blumhouse Facebook page today, so definitely check that out. But Edge of Sanity I've talked about it on the show before. It's one of my favorite kind of weird. I can't call it one of my favorite films because it's so weird. I can't classify
It's a weird one.
it.
Yeah.
But I enjoy it so much, and I have no idea why because it makes me feel really icky every single time I watch it.
It's Anthony Perkins' Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde movie under the guise of Jack the Ripper.
And it's made by, I think he called himself arty sexploitation. I'm just going to call him artistic softcore director. Everything else that he had made prior was these European lesbian films or these European exploitation films. And then he did Edge of Sanity, which is Jekyll and Hyde. But it's set in Victorian times, but a bulk of the costumes are 80s and everything's neon
Yeah,
and
the color
day
scheme
glow.
looks pretty crazy.
Yeah, and it's all at night, so there's all of these neon colors, but it's Victorian times, which is kind of weird. So there's a lot of anachronisms in it, but they're intended to be there, so it's very intentional. All of the makeup is very Boy George. It's got homoerotic tones, but I described it in the video, and a couple people have quoted this. It's awkwardly sexy. The movie doesn't know how to be sexy, and it's sexy in a way that makes you go, that's kind of sexy. I'm kind of turned on, but my stomach's grossed out at the same time, and I don't know how I feel about any of this. But it's just really a remarkable film that I really recommend seeing just because Anthony Perkins is fucking brilliant in it. And I mean, I know that a lot of actors kind of put into this weird softcore sexploitation type of film would kind of phone in a performance. He, if anything, is over the top more so than Psycho.
He never phoned it in. I'm bummed that like so many of those, because around that time he also did like Crimes of Passion with Ken Russell, and it's like they always like kind of push him towards doing the Norman Bates thing.
Yeah,
but he's so good that he at least transcends it in his performances.
This isn't Norman Bates.
No, not at all. It's very bizarre. But I do like it. I'm looking forward. That actually comes out from Scream Factory on Tuesday. And it's a double bill. It's uncut. The uncut version of Edge of Sanity's on there. It's a double bill with another movie called Destroyer, which I've always recognized the front cover.
It's got this guy in a skull mask on it.
Yeah, it's got like, but that's not what he looks like in the movie. It's just the poster. It's like a Shocker sort of thing. But the connection is Anthony Perkins plays a director in that movie.
Oh.
So it's actually an Anthony Perkins double bill that they put out. So I'm looking forward to watching both of them. I've never seen Destroyer, but I do rather like Edge of Sanity. I think it's a cool
There's something
release.
Alluring and repulsive at the same time.
Yeah, totally.
The last thing I watched is not horror, but I'm going to recommend it to anyone who's a movie fan. I had not seen it before. Overnight, which is the documentary on the making of Boondock Saints.
Oh, dude, that's one of the greatest movies of all time.
Yeah, so
I remember watching that in
yeah.
film school, and we're all like, "Holy shit!"
So I had
Like,
never
don't get
seen
ego,
it before.
you know?
Yeah, and we were. I was at lunch with Morgan Peter Brown and Joe Wicker on Friday, and we were talking about egos in Hollywood, specifically with directors and other people, creative types. And then one of them was like, "Yeah, just take a look at Overnight," and I was like, what? And I'd heard all the horrible stories about Boondock Saints and the director's hubris and everything like that, but I had never seen this documentary. It's actually on YouTube. Like the whole movie is on YouTube. And I think it was actually put there by the production company because it looked like a legit page that had put it up, like a legit upload. It wasn't like, some guy from...
This guy can't work. Watch it for free.
No, but the documentary, it just blew me away. First, because you're just like, I can't believe this guy actually exists and his hubris is this bad. But I also recommend it because it is one of the best kind of how films get made stories without actually being really boring. Like, through it, you learn like what paper play contracts are and points and front end versus back end and above the line and all this stuff. And it's a great tool to learn how Hollywood films are made. That's a lot more exciting because you're seeing it through this guy's eyes. So
double pair with Whom God Wishes Destroy, Apocalypse Now making of with Ford Coppola, which is basically I think one of the best making ofs ever because it's made by his wife at the time. And you just go like, how do movies like this get made? How did these epics get made against all odds? Or any movie, I guess. But Overnight's more about ego in the end. Right. And you know what? I have a weird, like, I appreciate what Overnight is as a documentary. Right. And but like, I have a weird thing about it because I actually I love the Boondock Saints. I'm one of the rare people in the West Coast that likes it. I don't know why. Like, everybody out here that I've met hates it. But me and my friends back in New York, like, love that movie. And I still stand by it. I actually do.
I have the same thing where my East Coast friends absolutely love it. And all the people I mention it to out here in LA are like, that's kind of a bad movie. And part of me feels like they saw Overnight first, and they're like, or they accuse it of being a Tarantino. But I think everyone liked Overnight. Like, let's say people who watch Overnight like Boondock while they're watching it. It's more about what happens after if you let that go to your head. But even Bekah just prefaced it as, it's about the making of Boondock Saints. It's not. The making of Boondock Saints is like the actual them shooting like the last 15 minutes. No, not even. There's 2 minutes of Norman Reedus and Sean Patrick Flannery on set. Like the actual movie. Wait, did you just say you think it's Daryl who dies? Was that what you were just? Was this indication of a secret sign? I should go watch the last. So we can do Boondock Saints 3, of course. But no, there's only like 2 minutes of footage from the actual shooting of the movie. Yeah, but it's fascinating to see. Look, somebody. Not that I'm defending the guy because I have no idea what he's really like, and I feel that that's probably accurate. But at the same time, can you imagine being 25 years old, a bartender? And all of a sudden, somebody tells you, you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. I'm going to give you $2 million to make your movie. Right. And you've got people like Mark Wahlberg coming to your barbecue. Like, what would that do to you when you were 25 trying to make he made a good movie. Like, it wasn't like it was terrible. Yeah, it was a really good movie. And it got well received. People like it. So but he definitely takes it. Yeah, no, for sure. The cool thing about a movie like that is I could imagine a good follow-up as a guy watching Overnight, realizing what he'd become, and then trying to change his life, and making a documentary guy trying to get back to Hollywood to give it another shot after learning his lesson. That would be an interesting story. Yeah, but at the end, he was like, it was pretty bleak, the portrait at the end. I started following him on Twitter just because I was so intrigued by his... Oh, he's on Twitter? He's on Twitter. Good. He's still trying to get movies made. Glad, He's still pushing TV, and I think he just directed a short. I'm like his stalker now. now.
Wow,
No, but
yeah.
I was so intrigued by the career and the
Willem Dafoe
the
is
kind
great
of
in that film.
Yeah.
bubbled
so
rise
really
and
good
then
in
the
that
burst.
film.
Yeah,
Very
Willem's
funny
Willem's
character.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So for me, I'm just going to shoot through these pretty quickly. Last week, I think it was last week, Bekah brought up Cherry Falls, which is now out on Blu-ray from Scream Factory. I always loved the film.
Hyman Holocaust.
Hy-
I think
oh
it was
my
me.
God, Hyman Holocaust.
Probably me last week, but yeah. it was-
Yeah. So, and maybe it was, but
I had a lot of fun watching.
I always loved the movie. I remember it came out in 2000 on VHS, but it was kind of post Columbine, so it was kind of hard to find here in the States. And then there was a DVD that paired it up with the movie Terror Tract, which is like I think it's an anthology with John Ritter. But I hadn't seen this movie in a long time. Looks great on Blu-ray. Still love it. It's just such a bizarre, batshit slice of that post-Scream like.
What about the scene where Michael Biehn wakes his daughter up in the middle of the night just to have a conversation to ask if she's a virgin?
If she's a virgin, amazing.
It's so fucked up.
It's
You're
just
like, what?
It's like the dialogue is good, but like so off kilter. And there's
Yeah.
like. Michael Biehn, I think, is actually really good.
He's
in
well
it.
cast, yeah,
He's
it's good.
really
It's good.
good. Brittany Murphy, I remember when I saw it as younger that I was like, oh, she's so good in this movie and she's so hot. And watching it now, she makes a lot of quote unquote interesting choices in
Definitely
terms of
off kilter, yeah.
her facial expressions and the way that she reacts.
I
And
remember her trying to be, I'll call it quirky in there, where everything
It's
kind of,
really
she
weird.
turns her head and kind of
she
talks
does.
in a very
She's very
punctuated.
emotional.
Yeah.
She tries to tries to kiss her gay best friend. At one point, the killer is like touching her face, and she tries to bite him like out of nowhere. And I'm like, these
That's
are
right.
all improv things. I can just tell. But overall, I really love it. It's a really cool little.
I think it's a
slasher
good
movie.
party film.
Yeah.
It's a good
Because
party
that's a
film.
party who hadn't seen it. It's pretty crazy. Some
And,
of the
and this is
jokes
the thing
in
I
it.
hate about Twitter is like because I hashtagged Hyman Holocaust
Yeah,
because I
I
just
do
think
too.
it's
Hyman
a
Holocaust, baby.
hilarious
It's great.
piece of dialogue from
Yeah.
a female character.
It's amazing. when
And
she's
someone kind of got on my case about like, what does that mean? Like a dare I say feminist? Got on my case about it. And I was like, it's a dialogue from the movie. It's hilarious. It's
Yeah.
about people having a pop your cherry party, and they're
Yeah.
like, ew, that's disgusting. And it's like, if you're not gonna watch the
Why
movie, I
did
don't
you
know-
write it,
Yeah.
Rob?
I don't
Why
know
did you
what-
write the
She's
movie?
I don't know what
Rob.
to tell you. If you're taking it out of context, it's a
Yeah,
fun
yeah.
movie. I really love it. If you've never seen it, it's one of my favorite slashers of that post Scream era. By
and
far.
it's kind of the last. It feels kind
It
of like the
was
last
like the
one.
last one,
Feels like
yeah.
the end of
Yeah.
a cycle, but it's also the ideas are just wacky. You know?
yeah. So
But I
super
think
fun.
the last 20 minutes is so fun.
amazing.
So
Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
I feel like the
Jay
first
Moore.
15 minutes are very generic, like other slashers of the time.
Yes.
Like to get you into it, just like Urban Legends or something. It opens
Sure.
very much like that, and then it goes progressively stranger. And
Yeah, and then once you get that premise that
There's some
like that's
payoff.
the killer's targeting virgins, and you're like, oh my
But the
God, this is
incest stuff
crazy.
with the dad is just you never find out. Like
Yeah.
there's this weird stuff. Oh, daddy. She says these things. She's having weird dreams and sleepwalk saying daddy. And you're like, what the fuck
Yeah.
happened when you were young? Something happened. I'm
There's a
sorry.
prequel movie there, I
Something
think.
happened with it, or they made a choice. Like her and Michael Biehn said to each other, "Hey, maybe
Let's make this weird."
And the director's like, I might go with it.
Just
nah,
go
no
with
worries.
it.
Fuck it.
Also, I do think Brittany Murphy is so adorable. I can't explain it. She's so adorable in this movie. It's the best she's ever looked in anything.
Okay.
Because his like post like Clueless when she was just starting to come into her
Yeah,
own.
she's no Shelley Duvall.
No,
definitely
no,
not.
But
of course
you know,
not.
It's
But
like
but up there, yeah. Thank you, Alec. I appreciate that.
I contextualize it.
And then I did 2 double bills this week. One I wrote about on Blumhouse.com. 2 3D movies that just came out on Blu-ray from Kino, who's doing excellent restoration work. One is called The Bubble. And it's a 3D movie from 1966. Really fat. Like I was really fascinated by it because essentially it plays like it feels like an extended episode of The Twilight Zone. It's really cool. It's this couple. This couple is flying on a small private jet with this guy, and the woman's pregnant. And during this flight, she's ready to give birth. It's happening early, but they're in a terrible storm. So he's like, "Oh shit, we have to make an emergency landing to the wherever we are, to some town, so she can give birth." And they do. And when they land in this town, it's just kind of like everyone's weird. Like everyone's kind of zombie-like. They just keep. They almost like they ignore them. They keep repeating the same dialogue, almost like everybody in this town's on a loop of some sort. So they're like, okay. And then slowly but surely, it's like, well, let's call our parents and let them know that we are safe when we had the kid. Can't get any outside lines or anything. And then they start noticing that the town's got these weird relics, like almost like a piece of the Lincoln Memorial. And you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't mean like this is like a best of famous monuments in the United States. So long story short, the couple and the pilot are like, this town is fucking weird. We got to get out of here somehow. Get in their car, try to escape. They get about 20 miles before they hit a bubble. they are trapped in this weird, like almost fake town.
Wow.
And immediately
like
I'm
under the dome
Yeah.
or whatever.
and that's
yeah.
what I thought. I was like, all right, this is 66. So Stephen King must have seen this movie.
On TV,
There's Under the
yeah.
Dome. Wayward Pines, that
yeah.
author. It's
That was the
very,
same thing.
very, like everyone's weird in town. And you
They
don't
do
know
it
why.
in Springfield in The Simpsons.
They do it in the spring. Yeah, exactly. There's a bubble in the spring. Yeah, The Simpsons. Everyone's like, Under the Dome ripped off The Simpsons. I was like, you know what? I think The Simpsons ripped off the bubble. But I thought it was a really fascinating movie. The thing is, narratively, some of it didn't make sense. And what I discovered is they re-released it 10 years later in 1976 as Fantastic Invasion of Planet Earth, complete with a poster that is not even remotely what the movie is, like this guy with a ray gun and like an alien UFO on top of him.
Oh, wow.
Because the theory is, are we trapped in a bubble that's now a human? Like while we were up in the air, did the aliens take over, and are we like in a human zoo now? Like it's one of the many theories that they threw out there. So I thought it was fascinating, but because I guess they trimmed it from 120 some odd minutes to 90 for the re-release 10 years later, and all those original elements were lost. So any original scenes that were in it you just never could find them. So this is the shorter version that got released in 76. And it's not exactly satisfying. Like it didn't end in a way where we're like, oh, that's cool. But I still liked it because of the weird Twilight Zone-ish vibe to it. And I was like, and the fact that you could see so many influences coming out of this movie. And it was very gimmicky. This is like they advertised it Space Vision, the first movie in Space Vision, which I don't know what that means, but that means a lot of stuff poking towards the camera. Right. So like they really overtly go for the 3D effect.
So you saw it in 3D?
Yeah. I
That's
watched
cool.
it.
That's fun, yeah.
It's available as a 3D Blu-ray at home. And then I paired that up with Gog, which is a 1954 science fiction movie about a robot named Gog and Mogog. I think that's Morgog, something like that. There's two robots.
Mogog.
And it's not good.
Nope.
But it's Bekah's favorite movie.
No,
Is it? No.
yeah, totally.
You
You recommended it to him or no?
No, I actually
She had a copy of it that I was
watched it, put it in trivia prizing because I was like, I don't need to own this.
And I was like, I
then
need to see this
Rob
in 3D.
was like, I have to watch it. It's in 3D.
3D, okay.
Yeah, it's a 3D movie. That was the whole point of it.
I don't think I made it through the whole thing. That's why I didn't even talk about it on the show. I was like, watched part and was like, this is really boring.
It's really
So
weird.
not
It's,
Mogog, you wanted less Gog.
I
less
needed
Gog.
less
No
Gog.
Gog, yeah.
It started out really strong with like it's an underground bunker in the 50s where these people are conducting all these experiments, and it actually starts out with a really scary sequence of them like playing with temperatures, and like they freeze a monkey, and then to the point where he's just completely frozen rock solid, and then are able to reanimate him and bring him back to temperature. But then the scientist gets stuck in the machine and he freezes to death. So you're like, oh, this is kind of fucked up. This is kind of cool. But then nothing happens for about an hour.
Yep.
Now, granted, the science of it, whoever wrote it, like it's fascinating dialogue about science. So I can imagine if I was a 12-year-old kid in 1954 that I'd find this all fascinating. But, now in 2016, it's kind of boring. And also there's not a single thing in the movie that warrants 3D. Like not anything with depth, not anything coming at the camera, nothing at all. And I watched an interview with the director who was like, yeah, my eyesight is odd, so I can't really judge 3D. So I had to rely on, whatever. Which is funny because the guy that did House of Wax with Vincent
Andre
Price
Toth had one eye.
only had one eye, so he
eye
could never
patch.
see it in 3D. And that's a great 3D
That's a great
movie.
3D, yeah. I mean, you can certainly guesstimate. You see somebody throwing a yo-yo.
Yeah,
at
but this
Unions.
movie unfortunately doesn't do any of that. And then, the two evil robots don't really do evil shit until the last 5 minutes.
Right.
So you're kind of like, it was kind of a bust. But the point being, if you have to pair two 3D movies up, and they're both from the same company, Kino, that might be a good double bill. But I definitely recommend the Bubble. Gog, maybe.
You didn't get me on the Gog.
Sorry.
I will not be
and
seeing
it's
Gog.
okay. You don't have to. And lastly, I went to the New Bev because they did a amazing double bill of Jaws 2 and Damien the Omen 2.
Which I was totally bummed I had to miss. That looked like an amazing setup.
Well, yeah, because they, it was like the very last minute. And I got to tell you, so Jaws 2 is great. They had a couple great trailers, and then the last trailer, of course, is for the original Jaws. So by the time that ends, you're just so pumped for the second one. I'd never seen it on the big screen.
I don't think I would have either.
Actually, the prints for both of them were flawless, gorgeous prints. Jeff Nelson from Scream Factory was sitting right in front of me, which is kind of fun. It's like I can't miss these sequels.
Damien too. I cannot remember the story of that.
I'm gonna get to that. I just want to say really quickly about Jaws 2. I know we've given it a lot of love, and they Universal just announced that they're putting all the sequels out on Blu-ray, including Jaws 3D in 3D.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm coming to your house that day.
We're gonna do a Jaws 3D party. But I love Jaws 2, and the funny thing, the thing that I took away from it, and I like tweeted about this, and people didn't understand what I meant. I just love actors like Roy Scheider, and I don't know where those guys are now. Like the older,
well, look at Gene Hackman. I mean, where's once Gene Hackman retired? Like, who's going to replace that?
Nobody's
no
got
one like that
thing
anymore.
because Roy Scheider is. I mean, he's a good-looking guy, but I mean, he's not. He's got an interesting face. Like that's what I noticed when I'm watching the sequel on the big screen. The other thing is, I knew going in, like I've read about it, that he really didn't want to do this movie. Like he didn't want to do Jaws 2. But you watch it, and he is fucking committed. Every single frame of that movie, he's in it. And it's like, man, I miss actors like this. Actors that are like, no matter what, it's work, and I'm going to do the best work possible. And they just have like this interesting like character stuff. And I picked up a lot of little things like right outside his house, like he actually made the thing that he floated on at the end of Jaws, he made into his like he put plants in it.
Oh, cool.
And it's right
that's
outside.
funny.
There's
You noticed
plenty
those
of fun little subtle connections to the original. They're like, oh, that's so cool. But I loved seeing that one on the big screen. I mean, a lot of people had not seen it, so the last 20 minutes.
How do you not even? I mean, the amount of time that's on AMC or TV growing up, it's like
there were people sitting next to me that were like reacting and jumping at stuff, and they were like, "We've never seen this." So
that's cool.
Damien the Omen 2 is interesting. Lance Hendrickson's in it, but he's not even credited because it's one of his really early films. I think it's really good. It's got a fascinating score, and it's really like loud and bombastic. I love. We were talking about the Omen last week, and some people love it, hate it. It's a weird balance. I think it's what's making me find the show really difficult to get into, because over the course of one movie, we're meeting a boy that strange things happen around him, and he's actually kind of likable. Like he's got this very close relationship with his cousin, who he now lives with. And over the course of the movie, he finds out the truth, who he is, and then by like the second half embraces it. So it's kind of a weird...
It's like Perfect Strangers with Balky.
Pretty much.
He embraces his cousin's evil.
Yes, and then all of a sudden, you know what I mean? Like it's hard to... The narrative is weird because you're following something and you feel sympathy for a character.
That was a series that I talked about last week. Omen is a good movie.
Yeah.
I didn't think it's a masterpiece. Like, it's a really good...
Yeah.
But the sequels, I never found them compelling. They always seem too wordy.
Yeah.
Too much explanation about what the devil is.
There's
and
a
it's
lot.
like, I've seen too many horror films to care about talking about the devil.
Yeah, I like the first one, but
Give me Black Phillip, yo.
the other ones they're very forgettable for me. Like I don't recall them.
Yeah, the thing about the second one is there's a lot of random, I don't want to say random violence, but that's the thing. It's like there's a lot of these elaborate kill scenes because that's what was shocking about the first one. But there's such a weird random nature to it that it's kind of hard to get invested in a character that then magically gets pecked by vultures and then hit by a truck. Like it's like so random that you're like, what?
Yeah.
But I enjoyed seeing it on the big screen because everyone was like, what the fuck is this? And at the same time, I could see there were a lot of movies that we grew up on when we were kids where you don't need an explanation. You just find it scary.
Yeah.
So it's not scary to me anymore now because I'm like, that makes no sense, but it's cool.
I still don't always need an explanation. It just has to work, you know?
Yeah. So I don't know. It falls somewhere in the middle where I think it's interesting. I don't love it.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I got to see it the way I did.
I really did want to go that double feature just for that. I think I'd seen all the Jaws films too recently for one of our Jaws episodes.
Oh, right.
So they're still so fresh in my mind.
Yeah,
I wasn't excited about that, but I would have gone to see that. I mean, if somebody played Damien 1, 2, and 3, I'd go to it.
I got to tell you, and this is what I love about seeing movies at the New Bev. So I don't remember what the trailers were exactly before the first one, but leading up to Damien, Omen 2, it was, let me see, the Exorcist trailer with the original music by Lilo Schifrin. Then it was the trailer to The Shining, the great one with the text and like the blood coming out at the camera.
Wait, The Shining, the overrated film, Ryan
overrated
Rollins?
Shining.
Overrated film?
So yeah, Exorcist, Shining, Rosemary's Baby trailer, and then the trailer for the first Omen, and then we went right into Omen 2.
Wow, that's cool.
So it was a great.
Yeah, the trailer
primer
shows
to
are
it.
such a special thing about going to that movie theater.
Yeah.
That's still my greatest experience with that 24-hour movie where they showed all these part twos, and I just turned to Jared. I was like, imagine if they played Fright Night 2 now, and then it started, and I was like, what?
Yeah, that's the theme. theme.
It's like you just don't know. It's magical.
Amazing. So that's everything I've seen. And we've got a special guest coming in who has a movie that's in theaters and on VOD right now.
Hopefully we won't get into a girl fight, but we invitation you to come and listen to the rest of the episode.
Jennifer's Body.
Yes.
That's a throw that in somehow.
We'll probably be eating sushi.
My favorite whole song, Jennifer's Body. There you go.
Eating sushi off Jennifer's Body. All right, let's do it.
And we are back with director Karyn Kusama, who has the film The Invitation releasing today. She's also known for Jennifer's Body and a ton of other amazing stuff.
Girl Fight.
Yeah, Girl Fight. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much for letting me be here.
Yeah.
Well, we luckily got to see it last night on a screener, and we're really excited because it's a movie. When I saw the lineup at Sundance, it was probably the one I would have picked to see just from the write-up. Very mysterious.
You mean South by?
Yeah, South by.
Yeah.
There weren't too many details given about it, and it's not. Well, people often throw around the term slow burn, but it's not really because you're feeling dread from frame one, basically. They get into a minor accident. We're not going to do too many spoilers, but early on and from then on, this is going to go somewhere primal.
Yeah.
Something bad's going to happen. You kind of know the subgenre. We always like to start at the start, and I saw an article posted today from Drafthouse, which really kind of blew my mind because we have some very similar early influences. It was like you breaking down some of the movies that got you into filmmaking. Mm-hmm. We usually like to start there to see what the movies, but a couple of them made me laugh out loud, which doesn't happen, especially your screening of Eraserhead, which really was quite a funny pose. So I figured let's start there. Like, what got you? When did you fall in love with movies, and then specific towards horror?
I probably have very vivid memories of just being in a theater and sort of feeling that sense of escape or that sense of sort of landing in at a home somehow by being in a dark theater with a bunch of people I didn't know. And I was lucky. I was able to watch things like Fantasia on the big screen, and my parents took me to see Creature from the Black Lagoon in 3D. And
did you take Fantasia as like a scary film at that age? Because I remember it being pretty
I did.
Oh, yeah.
I was terrified.
It's terrifying.
I was terrified.
My parents had to leave during the Night on Bald Mountain sequence because I freaked out so bad.
Oh, it's so scary.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys remember the animated version of Watership Down.
Oh, yeah.
With the bunnies.
One of the most depressing
I still can't.
movies of all time.
You mentioned it. Now I'm going to tear up and cry because someone said Watership Down.
I know. It's like a really intense animated movie to see as a kid, which I did. So I feel like I had access to these like emotional experiences really early. And
did you have a particular parent who enjoyed taking you to those things?
To be honest, no. I think my parents were just trying to keep 3 young children
busy
under the age of 4, busy. Yeah. And so it's just kind of by chance that I think I ended up obsessively going to movie theaters to sort of escape.
Find yourself. So there's a couple. The ones that blew my mind, actually. There's one movie that I've never seen anyone discuss, and it was one of the most powerful things I've still to this date. I wouldn't have called it a horror film, but I've seen it on horror film lists. It's Come and See by Elam Klimov.
Yes.
It's a war film. It was on that Time Out Top 100 a couple years ago, which surprised me because it really is a World War II film, but it has the end sequence of it is one of the most intense things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I probably started at 20. I wasn't too young when I started, but it really stuck with me. And probably the first person I've ever read that and, influences.
I mean, I think it's probably going to be one of those films that just over time needs to find the audience. I know that there are people who are definitely starting to kind of discover it, but for me it was like it was one of those movies where I saw it on a Tuesday and I had to go back the next day to just decipher it or decode it or get it out of my system. And a movie like Seven did the same thing to me.
Yeah.
I felt like at a tender young age, I needed to get some control over how this movie made me feel. And I don't know if I ever got that control, but I started to see the control the movie had over me and what the mechanics of that were.
And it's a safe place to lose control, right? Like,
absolutely.
That's one and I think that's why a lot of people are drawn to horror films. And do you remember the early, besides Fantasia, which is kind of hard, do you remember some of the early horror films you saw in theater?
I was older. It wasn't like, I think I was like 20, 21 when I saw in the theater a midnight showing of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And that movie really... it's interesting, that movie, even more than the super well-known kind of 70s classics, The Exorcist and even Rosemary's Baby, all those kind of movies, ultimately it was Texas Chainsaw that made me feel like there can be terrifying films that also have the power of art. And that movie really, that was another one I had to get out of my system, just see it again, somehow understand why it did what it did to me.
I really loved, actually, the piece that you brought up at the top of the show was, I think it was on the playlist by Ed Douglas for Anywhere. And I loved when you talked about Texas Chainsaw, you referred to it as a work of art. And we talk about the movie a lot, but Elric and I were lucky enough to see it a couple of years ago for the anniversary with William Friedkin, like hosting with Tobe Hooper and interviewing him before.
I remember, and I couldn't go to that, and I was so sad.
It was great. It was so great.
Yeah, but, he really got stories. I mean, what we didn't know about it till then, I didn't know about it till then, that was that Friedkin's largely responsible for why it even got seen in L.A. because he saw it and he just championed it. He's watched this movie and he goes, oh my God. He took it to every studio and said, you have to watch this little independent film from Austin. And without him, that movie probably never gets play here at all.
Right.
Wow. And the whole, Yeah,
but the big thing I took away, again, the reference of a work of art, and Toby admitted that he had many influences on it, including Seconds, the Frankenheimer movie, which I hadn't seen until he mentioned it, and I was like, oh, well, I'm going to go check that out.
Oh, the Criterion of that is gorgeous.
Yeah, it's great. Great movie. But there's a painting he referenced called Christina's World.
Oh, yeah.
And when he said that, I was
looking
like,
this up.
I all of a sudden was like, oh, okay. Oh, it's totally a work of art inspiring another work of art.
Yeah.
But
and it's not a violent or scary piece. It's just her dreaming.
Looking up at a house.
Oh, is this the girl in the field sitting underneath? Oh my gosh!
Everyone's seen it. They just
but
don't
it
know it
looks
hasn't
so
done it.
eerie and sinister.
Yeah.
Well, also there's
this
incredible mystery to it. You don't quite understand why you have to look at it, but you do, and I think that's something about that movie from its opening frames. You just sort of feel like, why do I have to keep watching these flames leap off the surface of the sun? It's pretty.
Well, that's what I was just
intense.
saying. That movies are safe, but of all horror films I've ever seen, that's the most. It feels like the most dangerous. It feels dangerous.
Oh, I
What's
agree.
happening to people's dangerous, and it feels like I can't stop it from happening.
I agree.
It's really like, I mean, the first appearance and the closing of the door. I think it's about as good as movies get.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
'Cause it's terrifying.
Yeah.
You have to hold something back. But can you please tell us the Eraserhead story? Because I saw Eraserhead a lot later, and I loved it. But I remember my sister saying, she was 5 years older than me, and she saw it and said she would never have children after she watched it. She was probably 15 or something.
That is really funny.
Yeah,
Well,
I watched it in high school, and it like messed me up. I didn't understand what I was watching or what the nuances were, but I was just like, whatever this is bad.
Yeah.
I can't get married or something.
My mom, I still to this day don't understand why she decided to take us to see Eraserhead. She took me and my brother and sister to like a Tuesday matinee in
I'm
the
surprised
theater.
it played at that time.
I'm intrigued by the Eraserhead matinee.
I know. Well, you know what? It's like that's part of my growing up in the 70s was there were repertory theaters that would play a weird movie for a week and then play another weird movie for a week. And
Is that here in L.A.?
No, it was in St. Louis, Missouri.
St. Louis. Oh, cool.
And so in St. Louis, Missouri, in the middle of the country, I saw in 1978, I saw Eraserhead in the theater in the middle of the day, and my mom was just like, this is playing. Let's just check it out. It sounds kind of interesting, and I think if she'd gotten a true summary of the film, or if she were to have seen who David Lynch was to become in his career, I suspect she would kind of have lost interest. But she landed there sort of just sheerly out of curiosity. And by the time, for those who haven't seen the movie, there is a baby of sorts. But Lynch himself remains very mysterious about how he achieves this baby, because it's clearly some kind of special effect or
Animal.
some kind of yes.
I'm gonna go with chicken baby mutant.
Yeah. There's something, but then also a very real quality to it. I mean, it's like alive. It's a living thing.
Has some sort of mechanical.
Yes, but it gets really sick, and in getting really sick, it gets all these sores and starts throwing up. And my brother and sister, who were 5 and 6 at the time, were just like, no, I'm sorry, they were 6 and 7, I think. And they just started weeping because my mom couldn't stop laughing at what she was seeing. And there's
She's
a
like
moment.
a character from a David Lynch
Oh my
movie.
God,
Laughing at
totally.
this violent
Because there's a
movie.
moment where the main character says, "Oh, you really are sick," to the baby. And the baby's clearly like on death's door. And when my mom started laughing like that, she just shouldn't. It's like something switched, and she couldn't stop laughing. And I think my mom, my brother and sister were like terrified, and they asked to leave. My mom said, "I'm going to stay and watch the movie. You can stand outside and wait for me."
No helicopter
It's a
parenting
great
back then.
mom.
I
It's
was
just
like 9.
You were 9? Okay.
Yeah. And so I took them outside, and it was one of those old time theaters with like portal windows through the doors. And so with them crying, like sobbing hysterically next to me, I was like standing on my tippy toes trying to look in
And see it.
to the rest of the movie, because whatever did that to my mom, I had to pay attention. Like I had to see. And of course, it took literally a couple decades to understand that, you know, here's a woman who had 3 kids in 3 years, and maybe she was a little stressed out, and maybe seeing this like nightmarish vision of parenthood was actually a complete relief for her. And so,
which independent films were kind of the first films that could do that. They could show
Totally.
you a negative view of parenthood.
Totally.
Like something about being scared.
totally, and
or
have it be
disturbed.
just like blackly comic and
Yeah.
completely macabre and gross and surreal. And I think in some weird ways now I recognize, I think my mom felt spoken to by that movie. And it's very powerful to think about, like, sort of almost like watching the movie. Even now, it's like watching a dream, a kind of pretty bad dream. Yeah. But then as a kid, half through the window of the theater with my hysterical siblings next to me, it was really like a bad dream. And you never forget that. It's become a great memory.
It's the charm of personal cinema. Something that
Totally.
It's not just indie cinema. People mistake it, but it's something that somebody is telling you their deepest secret with a movie.
Absolutely.
Like he had. I've heard it was about Jennifer Lynch's
Wow.
daughter, and she was born, I guess, with clubfoot, and
Wow.
seeing those deformities in her pushed him to create this thing, and he didn't want to be a father and all that stuff.
Wow.
And you're like, oh, so he's probably connecting to all these other people out there.
Yeah.
And it's pretty wild.
But also that was I think that might have been the first movie where I recognized that what made the movie so scary was the sound. Mm-hmm. And I paid attention to sound pretty early, I think, as sort of a tool in filmmaking. But I always look to his movies as inspiration.
Yeah, I think it's a big part of the invitation.
It is.
I feel like that. I feel like it keeps growing in the intensity as the film goes, and it locks you into a bubble with it. You can't escape
And
with sound. Yeah.
There were moments that the tone of the conversation didn't change, but the tone of the music changed.
Yeah.
And so you were like, oh shit, something's happening.
Yeah,
just because
yeah.
the music changed, but everybody's still talking normally.
Yeah.
It was a nice little nod.
Yeah.
It's
Can you
good.
tell us a little bit about how the invitation kind of came about? Because I'm most curious, because obviously you try to work on as many projects as possible, but you never know which one is going to go. So
Right.
sometimes you can work on something for years and then finally get to realize it, and other times you just come up with this idea, and before you know it, that's the one you're doing. So where does this one fall?
It's the former. I mean, I wish I could say that I have any projects where it just sort of came together quickly and all of a sudden I have a movie to talk about. I unfortunately have yet to report on that kind of experience. But I will say with this one, it took a long time. My husband is Phil Hay, and he's one of the writers. And his partner, Matt Manfredi, they work as a team. And they usually write pretty sort of big studio comedies or big studio
Aeon Flux?
sci-fi movies. Yes, they wrote
I
Aeon
remember,
Flux,
yeah.
but they also wrote like Clash of the Titans and Ride Along and Ride Along 2, and so they
Wow, that is that is
a
range.
crazy puller.
From
I
invitation
know.
to ride along.
I know.
Holy shit!
I know. Well, I mean,
the
I mean,
writers to
Holy
ride along.
That's range.
that would actually be amazing.
That is pretty. No, that's
That's
actually pretty
hilarious.
impressive to have that kind of diversity as a writer.
It's true. I mean, and that's the thing. I think they're sort of. I'm excited for this movie to be out because now people, I think, are seeing another thing they don't just do, they do very, very well, which is kind of extremely mature, sophisticated screenwriting.
Yeah.
And so when I read the script, they had originally been thinking they were going to direct it. But I sort of shot my hand up and said, like, I hope you'll consider me if you decide that,
if you want to see your child again.
right, exactly. It didn't exactly go there, but I suppose it could have. But
how long ago was that you read that particular script, that story?
Oh, it was years ago. I mean, it was
Cool.
probably 6-7 years ago.
So was the film like 6 years in the making, or was it like it sat on a shelf and then like
It just
within
took,
like
it just
a year
took
it
a
takes
really
off?
long time. I mean, it's
All
so
films do.
I know, and that's the thing. I think it's interesting when you tell people how long it really takes. There's definitely a sense of like you feel the deflating in the room, like, oh
Yeah.
God, that's what you're committing to. And I, if I had to look at it on a purely temporal level, I think I'd just sort of give up and walk away. So I just sort of keep taking it one day at a time. It took a long time. I think the structure of the film for more conventional financing outlets was really challenging. It was hard, I think, for people to picture how the film worked as a thriller, in quotation marks, when it takes so long to sort of uncover its secrets. And I just always said it has to feel like emotional suspense. You have to feel like there's an emotional horror first, and you're investigating that, and the question has to sort of emerge. Will this go into like more I don't want to say more predictable genre territory, but genre territory that's a little more familiar to us.
As I told these guys before the show, I said, when Zodiac shows up, usually your party's about to take a bad turn.
Yeah.
Because he's actually one of my, Joe Carroll Lynch is one of my favorite actors on
Yeah.
screen. I mean, every time I see him in something, he has a different side to him.
Oh, he's
like you'll see him in
wonderful.
Zodiac, but then you'll see Fargo.
Oh, yeah.
And what was it? There's something really recently where I was like, oh my god, Walking Dead. He had one episode where he's like the guru stickman, and he's so nice and it's just he's just one of those guys. He's
Yes.
fascinating. But I have a feeling like when somebody like that shows up to a dinner party and no one else recognizes him, you're like, uh-oh.
Well, and what's funny is I think Zodiac hadn't come out when they first imagined the role for John. They had worked with John before. They were all very close, and they wrote that role for him, really thinking of Norm in Fargo.
Yeah.
Thinking
The
of
nice
sort
guy,
of,
yeah.
just thinking of his sort of kindness and his sort of willing to take a back seat to everybody else. That's also kind of Pruitt. Really
Yeah.
polite, really a helping hand.
The bowling shirt was a nice touch.
Yeah.
That was something John knew he wanted to wear.
There's certain things about it. The first thing I thought when I was watching is like directing nightmare. I'm like, 3 people around a dinner table. Okay. 4, oh God, eye lines, matches.
I know. 12.
10 or 12 people.
I know.
I was literally halfway through it going, I can't even believe how you could keep this all. The only time I've seen like that many people is Ice Storm. Ice Storm, they keep it a beautiful movie, really well done. But this was the first time I've seen that many people and still been engaged, that it's not just a conversation. We're going somewhere with it. What was that like for you to direct that many people in like one space? It's a whole film.
It was even
one
like,
space.
oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to say even the living room, because you had people
Yeah.
moving in and out, and now I'm going to go lean on a chair and then take a walk over to the fireplace, and
know.
again matching eye lines.
It was really challenging, and I think for people who sort of don't really actually understand the mechanics of filmmaking, they read the script and they say, "Oh, you can make
people
this
in
in
a room.
10 days,"
Yeah,
and
totally,
it's just a bunch of people in a room, and it's like, yeah, but if you want any of them to feel related to one another, you actually have to shoot individual coverage for all of them, and that's simply not going to be possible. So it was interesting for me. It forced me, because I had a 20-day shoot.
Just still very short for.
It was still very short. I had to really be thinking about what the movie needed to feel like. And it was nice to know from the beginning, the script kind of told me this too, we're in Will's point of view. He's sort of the anchor to the whole story. So I could kind of fix myself to him. But then there are these points where I think you need to step outside of Will's point of view and look at the rest of the night and kind of ask, is Will seeing things here differently than things might actually be
Reliable
happening?
narrator question.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Is he reliable or is he?
Exactly. And so it was an interesting challenge to have to figure out the moments where I sort of stepped outside of that very subjective film language and had to kind of open the frame up again for the audience.
Yeah, because we're not wanting to go to the later parts of the movie where there's spoilers, but early on, it's a guy coming back to a house that was his, that he lived in. And so, he kind of wants to look around and stuff, but it's uneasy. It's seeing somebody experiencing their memories of a child who was there. That's where these Don't Look Now comparisons I was saying, which are very similar. Like, it's about grief. It's an emotional horror film, whereas a lot of films don't even bother to engage you on emotional level, which is really cool. And it's about your intuition of something. And I always say, Don't Look Now, if you rewatch Don't Look Now, people who've only seen it once, when you rewatch it, you go, oh, this is just about somebody who, if he'd followed his true instinct, he would know, but he doesn't. He denies everything around him, whereas your film's very much about somebody who actually is listening to themselves, but everyone else around them denies.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that's where the horror comes from.
Yes. Our collective denial.
Yeah, which is really cool. Now, I'm curious, because it said on, 6 years to make something, is it casting that then finally, like, is it Logan from Prometheus?
Right. Honestly, what happened was, I think, I don't want to say our mistake, but our approach had been that we were going to make the movie for basically a little bit more money than we ended up making it for. And that was sort of I think the stumbling block, because even a little bit more money, making a movie for $2 million instead of $1 million, or $3 million instead of $1 million, it's like there's this expectation that, Michael Fassbender is going to hop on board, and that you're going to have these massive stars in your movie, which is just part of it is this sense that now there's a formula to putting movies together through foreign territories, and that somehow you're going to be able to make all your money back before a movie even exists. And it's just like, that's not how you get movies made.
I've talked about this before, but I think it's been a while, that there is actually a list that somebody gave me once that had a list of actors on it, like every actor in Hollywood, and showed how much different regions would be willing to pay for movies with those actors in it. Like sight unseen. Like if it's got Kiefer Sutherland, it will sell for this much in Germany. Sure. And that is how a lot of films get casted, is you will just look at that list. If you're in this purely profit, you will look at that list and go, oh, well, this guy's selling huge in Indonesia. Right. We'll make sure he's in the movie.
Well, even that's changed so dramatically since the DVD market kind of crashed. Because that's the other thing, is like you think, all right, we could sell it, but then when it comes out on video and all that, and that's this movie, for example, and I'd be curious as a filmmaker to know your thoughts. We're in a weird time where movies come out theatrically and on VOD the same day.
Are you guys doing VOD the same day? Are you on VOD this Friday as well?
Today.
Today.
Watch it right now after you listen to this. But no,
run to the theater,
because we talk about a lot of films, a lot of the big films, a lot of the little films, independent films, and most of our audience ends up watching this on VOD because they can't get to a theater near them to see it. So how is that for a filmmaker? I mean, because usually you make something to be cinematic, or
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
Is it a little weird knowing that most people? I mean, people have good TV setups these days, so that's somewhat encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. It's there's a little part of my heart that's broken about it, but that's just where the business has gone. I think the theatrical experience remains the gold standard, and I don't know what could possibly replace it in my home. I mean, I just can't imagine, unless I suddenly decided to buy a theater in the ArcLight and make that.
Because it's also the people, right? So you could have a big screen, but that collective gasp or the collective laughter is irreplaceable.
And that's the thing, actually, with The Invitation, that I've seen it in multiple theaters now with multiple audiences, and big bunches of people. It's like they feel each other's sort of collective sense of anxiety and dread and questioning, and soon people just start talking to the theater, to the screen. I mean, they just start, and it's really interesting to see. It feels kind of old fashioned in the best way, that it's one of those movies that just makes people kind of nervous if they're hooked into it.
That suspense, more than horror.
I agree,
because you don't know if it's going to happen or not. In this movie, there's even 30 minutes in, I would say I'm almost going, oh, maybe it is more about just in his head kind of thing. And that's true suspense. You're building it.
You're imagining a bunch of different possibilities. Yeah, totally. So I mean, for me, to get back to your question, I mean, the theater experience is essential for me. But I'm also starting to look at the realities of my life. It's like I have a 9-year-old son. I have periods of time where I'm working nonstop. I'm not in my 20s anymore where I could literally see a movie every day. I could see multiple movies every day if life was good. And that's,
This guy's trying.
I mean, it's a great way to be engaged and kind of just truly immersed in the art form.
Right.
But what do you do if you need choices and want to see interesting movies, but you can't always get to a theater? I am now starting to see that I'd rather see something on VOD than not see it at all.
That's where I am. I mean, I have a lot of people, when the horror movies will come out, will say, I only want to see them theatrically. And I can't do that. I mean, 2 kids.
Yeah.
So, VOD has saved me. I absolutely love it. Plus, it's a click of a button. I don't even have to drive
It's
to the
the
video
irony
store.
when they suggested, recently you have the theater owners and Spielberg saying they're going to do this thing where it's $50, to see a brand new movie. And it makes me laugh because I'm like, it would be twice that to go to the movies and have a babysitter and to
God, yeah.
It's kind of crazy, even though it sounds expensive. When your son turned 9 and you showed him Eraserhead, how did that go? Because I'm just curious. Did that go as you planned?
Yeah.
Were you laughing all the way, cackling?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, God. I mean, that would seriously traumatize him. He could barely get through Winnie the Pooh. When
Isn't
he
that
was
funny
young.
though? Like all of us, because we all come from that same. Like I think somebody showed me Creepshow 5 and it fucked me up. But then you have kids, and the last thing you want to do is fuck them up.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
shelter them so much from horror because you're like, I don't want to take the lead.
No, it's been interesting gauging too how each kid is different because like even this past weekend was my daughter's birthday party and one of our friends came dressed as a dinosaur.
Oh my God.
And half of the kids like immediately ran to the dinosaur
Yeah.
hugging him and the other half like
They
scattered to the
freaked
perimeter of the
out.
yard screaming and crying and
Of
we were
course.
like I wasn't expecting quite the
It was
diverse
quite
mix.
a reaction.
Yeah,
Last
it was
time
crazy.
he was popular. The dinosaur
Yeah.
was huge,
Yeah.
but then,
Yeah, this time, like, my daughter ran up and was like, the dinosaur came to my birthday party, and all the other kids are, like, on the porch screaming.
So funny.
Yeah, there's no way to gauge.
Has your kid seen any of your films yet, or what's how do you
No,
feel about showing your work to?
Yeah, it's funny. The invitation is definitely not something to show him.
It's also a very adult horror.
Yeah,
film. That's what I
very.
really liked.
Totally.
I
It's a
love-
grown-up
yeah.
movie.
And
I
that's
mean,
so rare. Like even good horror films, they're very rare. It's probably like a few a year that are actually aimed at adult audiences.
Absolutely.
Which is really refreshing.
I love them. I mean,
Yeah.
I think like something like The Babadook was so interesting because I was like, oh, I have a shiver of recognition when I see this mom, and it's really because I'm just watching a woman my age.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
pretty cool.
And there's no off button.
No.
Like in people, I've seen people. A lot of people who've never had kids or anything will complain about the kid. Oh, that fucking kid! I haven't heard anyone who actually had kids complain about the kid. They just go, "Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not
that's
the
how
kid's
kids
fault.
are.
That's who the kid is.
Yeah, that's
There's
my
just
kid."
No off button.
Yeah.
You don't get a choice in this. They're yours.
You get a
you know?
weird kid. You're stuck with your weird
Yeah.
kid. That's
Yeah,
just the way
I kind
it
of
is.
love the kid. I gotta say, when I watched it, I was like, "Oh, that kid's imaginative."
Yeah, totally. I really
He's
appreciated
He's
it.
lively. I like him.
Just take the crossbow or whatever it is away. That's the subtle-
Exactly.
I'm curious because you broke through in a big. I mean, I remember. I can't remember how old I was. I was probably like 21 or something when Girl Fight broke through. I was a big indie. I was living in New Zealand and it was at the New Zealand Film Festival. I'm pretty sure that's where I saw it and made a real splash. And then you've also had studio work. What's the big difference as a filmmaker when you're going from project to project and having to do something nickel and dime every cent for versus a project where the canvas is bigger and you probably have a little less control. I would imagine
a lot less control.
But I assume you had a lot more flexibility and time with something like Jennifer's Body.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I miss something about the resources of a studio movie because you can literally sort of try. I mean, you use the word canvas. It's like you can start the painting and halfway through prep say, you know what, I think I need to start over. I mean, like you can really actually have a little bit of time to make big shifts stylistically toward what it is you're going to try and do. You have time to make mistakes. But then the problem I find with at least my studio experiences has been that in the end, the particularly with Aeon Flux, that wasn't my movie that got released.
How did that work? Like, were you brought onto that? Did you develop the movie with them, or
I read the script when Phil and Matt had a draft, and it was sent to me by my agent. And I'd read a lot of stuff I didn't really like, and this one it was an incredibly sort of soulful romantic sci-fi story. And I really responded to it. And I went out to LA trying to get the job, and I assumed I wouldn't get it. But I just fought, and I came into it really prepared and had thought a lot about it, and crazily got the job. And I just don't think I understood, okay, the part that I thought was going to be the hardest part, which is getting the job, that's actually the easiest part. I didn't know that. I got the job.
That's a good point.
I actually got the job. And now the really hard part, which is negotiating all these personalities, all these studio politics. The studio was in crisis when I got there. I didn't really know that. And so 3 administrations into making the film on the part of Paramount, I was like, oh, wow, I'm in a kind of complete managerial clusterfuck, and I just couldn't have seen that coming. I don't actually think anyone could have, but it was a particularly bad situation for me to have that be my second film and to have that be such a bigger film than my first. I think, in retrospect, I needed probably just a ton more protection, and I wouldn't have known how to get it.
Like, did you have a producer who you had worked with, or is it like a studio producer that you're paired up
Well,
for
there
that?
was a studio producer, and then I was
Brought
able
your
to
own.
bring somebody on. But it's like I think we were both a little bit like blindsided by how insane the situation eventually became.
And how does that studio experience compare to something like Jennifer's Body, which is, yes, bigger, but it also seems like the movie you would want to make? I mean, it's,
Yeah, that's an interesting movie because I would say it's like I'm always doing these like asinine percentages. So I'm like, it's 87% mine. But I do feel like it's pretty much mine. It's like a lot of what I wanted to do with it is preserved. But, it's funny because I recently got to see it again in Houston. They did a double feature of Jennifer's Body.
Sam Zimmerman was,
Yeah.
he was on our last episode.
Oh, awesome.
And I'll tell you, this will make you feel good. This before we even announced you were here, they went around the room, but we were doing our underrated and overrated movies, and there was 6 of us.
It's our defense.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were
In defense.
defending
Yeah.
movies that.
I ran around the table. Jennifer's Body was thrown down by Sam for underrated. All 6 got the thumbs up.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Which
we
is
all
pretty
agree.
shocking because that doesn't
Completely
happen very
underrated.
often.
I love that. That's such a
There was no debate. It was like,
Yeah, it was
all right,
like,
that's-
yeah, we agree. There's no debate.
I
here.
haven't
my
seen
God.
it in so long
Underrated.
that I was last to respond. I will admit, because I was like, I haven't seen it in a while, and I was looking at that, scanning my brain, going, I'm going to give it a thumbs up.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I will
Peer
rewatch it.
pressure.
That's
peer
so
pressure.
funny. I love it. I mean, I think, there were things in the movie that I would have done a couple of things here and there I would have done differently that I just think there was anxiety around the movie. Like, what is this horror comedy for girls? What are we supposed to do with it? Like, all of a sudden, the thing everyone was in agreement about making, people suddenly weren't in agreement. And I just think it's like taking a leap to not make something that's like straight down the middle, And I'm proud of the movie. I really am. And I just wish that people could have seen it with a less jaundiced eye. It's like there was such a weird
Was
hostility
some of that
toward the
coming
movie.
off Diablo's, Cody's like strong voice, like literal voice, coming right off Juno? So everyone's like,
It was like a combo
judging
of that
her.
and Megan Fox.
And Megan
Megan
Fox,
Fox.
because
It was
she
like-
was at the same time both loved and kind of, some people were kind
I
of
thought she was
lukewarm on her.
perfectly cast.
She
in that.
was
Yeah.
so good in the movie.
Yeah,
and
she's
and
really
in
good.
terms of that notion of strong voice, I mean, just to derail the conversation for a second, I mean, it's like we don't say that about Quentin Tarantino
Yeah,
or
yeah,
David
yeah.
Mamet or
I mean
you
it
know
in
what
a
I mean?
positive way, but like if that was like the negative, because you know what I mean? Like if it was,
Yeah.
if people can't get their head around, I mean, Juno obviously was so beloved.
Yeah.
That always comes with the backside.
No, it's totally
You know,
true.
It always
Totally
just
true.
happens.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
and what's that like directing, because Tarantino directs his own version of that strong voice, right?
Yes.
What's it like having to direct someone else's words that's so specific? Because I do find her dialect so specific.
It is very specific. I mean, for me, what I loved about it was it brought me in touch with some of the movies I really applied when I thought of making Jennifer's Body, like Heathers and Valley Girl, and even to some degree Fast Times. Although Fast Times at Ridgemont High is a little bit more naturalistic, but just this idea that like teenagers speak in a secret language, and this was just taking that idea and really heightening it. And for me, that felt like totally that felt really cinematic, speaking of, you know?
I love that you said that because I actually just revisited it with your commentary with Diablo a couple of days ago.
Oh.
And the thing I love about the movie, and I hope you take this as a compliment because this is what I mean by it, but like when we were growing up, we watched a lot of weird shit on HBO. It was just like they would show the same like 10 weird movies and you'd catch it late at night and be like, I have no idea who thought this up because it's so... We talk about it a lot. Horror in the 80s. Has a fantastic element to it.
Yeah, everything's very out there.
And fantastic and out there, which most horror of the 2000s on doesn't have. So when I saw Jennifer's Body, I was like, this is totally a movie I would have seen at 12 years old on HBO, like late at night. That's just so bizarre and fantastic. And, now you just started talking about some of your influences on it. But, I mean, was that kind of what... Even to this day, because this was 2009. You can't compare it to anything that was going on in horror at that point.
No, I know, and maybe that was harder, made it harder for the movie, you know, because it didn't have a kind of, it didn't have a sibling or a parent out there to say like, if you liked, you know, and so it was tough because how do you talk about Heathers and The Howling and Valley Girl and American Werewolf in London in the same conversation, and yet that was what we had to do. I mean,
in this room, you're good.
Yeah,
I can't speak for outside this room. In this room, those
right
are
here,
our
I'm
references.
safe. Right here, I'm safe. Well, that's good to know. But I mean, you know, it's like I felt like I wanted to talk to my actors about, you know, like deep kind of girl politics and all the sort of soul stuff that happens between girls when they're friends through adolescence. And I also wanted to get the whole cast together and have us watch Evil Dead 2, you know, like because I just felt like we're going for something that needs to feel true and completely insane and theatrical at the same time. And for me, that Venn diagram, if you can find that bullseye, I just feel like that's sublime, and that speaks directly to that teenager that I know I was. Like if I had seen Jennifer's Body when I was 17, I would have just been like, well, finally somebody understands me.
How aware do you have to be when you're making the movie about that you have to hit an R, you can't go into the NC-17, because it feels like one of those movies, because that's so dark what happens to her initially.
I know.
That puts you on that journey, which is, it has to be. Like I always talk about The Lovely Bones as an example of from book to screen, why the screen doesn't really work, because on the book it's so dark what a character goes through that you needed that to then get what comes after. How aware of you are of the rating, and how much do you have to kind of pull back with certain things? Or
you know, a lot of the... I mean, it was more, to be honest, there was stuff in the script that was more overtly like gore, overtly about, you know, pulling out entrails like confetti kind of stuff. And that was the stuff we had to kind of promise the studio, look, we're not going to be staring at a guy's intestines for too long. Like that kind of thing. We had to sort of control that part of it. But to be honest, I really think it was some of the comedy and the verbal sophistication or sort of mystery of that comedy and the emotional stuff that actually bothered the studio the most. And that wasn't about ratings. That was just about, like, what do we do when a mother breaks down crying over her dead son? It's suddenly not fun anymore.
Right.
And I was a little bit like, well, guys, I'm not here to make a bunch of boys who are perfectly likable dying. I actually don't think that's very funny. So let's find a way into sort of this like netherworld we're existing in, where like people cry real tears and people also say utterly, utterly horrible things to one another. You know, I mean, we have to find room for this kind of vision, you know.
How did I always am fascinated by these test screenings that, you know, we've all probably been invited to at some point in our lives.
Yes.
You see how ridiculous the notes can be. Like, but that film strikes me as one that if you let the audience decide, if they listen too much to like the wildly divergent notes, I'm sure you would get on that.
Oh yeah.
Like, do you remember any of the early kind of reactions? And what
there was one that Diablo and I wanted to frame. She might, you know what? She might even actually have it framed somewhere in her house, because it was a test screening, you know, like the questionnaire, and it said, "What do you wish you? What did you wish the movie had?" that it didn't have. And of course, a lot of the questions on the questionnaire are like instantly negative. So you're just sort of like, why are you framing it like that?
It's pushing them that way, yeah.
But in any case, the answer was spelled MOAR, mower, bubes, BEWBS.
When will men learn that if they misspell boobs, they will never get boobs?
You've lost all credibility as soon as you misspell boobs.
Yeah. It was pretty dark.
That's
I mean,
pretty
and
funny.
we were just like, that's kind of the one thing we
Is that
actually
our common
can't.
denominator?
Yeah. It's sort of like the one thing everyone wants, and it's something we can't give.
Well,
so.
that would have been in a contract anyway, right? Like,
Oh, it was
somebody
totally
like
in the
Megan
contract.
Fox wouldn't-
No, Megan wasn't going to do
'Cause
it.
she was like at her apex.
Yeah, and she was just
Yeah.
like, there's,
I love that that's the guy that they single out and like, we need you to fill this out, this
Yeah.
form, because I went to one test screening once and like I was and I loved the movie that I saw and I was on my way out and I was like, oh, I loved it. I'd love to fill out a thing. They're like, no, if you liked it, no, you're okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, so you're specifically going after people that hated this movie?
Yeah.
To fix it for them? Like,
Yeah.
I was in a
should it
test
be
screening.
mixed half and half maybe?
I did
But
one
no.
for the strangers, and they wouldn't let me fill out a scorecard for the same
'Cause you
thing.
liked it.
Yeah, on the way out, they were
Wow.
like, "Did you like the movie?" And I was like, "Yeah, I thought it was great."
You can
Okay,
go.
thank you. And that was it. I was like, "But I wanted to fill out the card. My voice matters." And yeah, I didn't.
But see, I
fill
think
out the
there's
card.
this really funny notion, and this is, this is what makes me so excited to have made the invitation. I feel like there's this kind of crazy idea that everyone acknowledges is pretty crazy in studio filmmaking, that you can engineer a better movie with enough voices in the mix. And it's just like...
Which doesn't work in any other business
No,
practice.
no, it never
imaginable.
does. It
Like
never does.
painting?
Yeah.
You're not going to ask for
Everyone
everyone's opinion.
critique and tell us what you think. No,
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
the studio take the feedback from those and did any changes happen based on the test screenings?
In Jennifer's Body?
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely had to attempt to please more boys and please a certain kind of girl in a way that just felt like these two things are completely canceling each other out.
Without boobs.
Yeah, I mean, just
Boobs.
more boobs. It just was a very strange process because the movie was clearly divisive. I mean, it was clearly going to be that movie that you argued about. And I remember so vividly test screening after test screening, the focus group that just was pulled randomly out of the theater and sat in the front of the theater and had to wait the 10 minutes for everyone to fill out their form. And then they were asked even more specific questions. The focus group sort of final scores were always about 10 points higher than the general questionnaire that you had to fill out like while the credits were running. And I really think it's because they had 5-10 minutes to just sort of chat among themselves, just sort of sit with it for a second and kind of decide, I like that movie. And there's just something about giving people a questionnaire and asking for them to participate in making something that, granted, it's not like I felt like I was out to make the sorrow and the pity with this film. I was trying to make something entertaining, but I still think entertainment can be art and should be art.
Yeah.
And it was just so weird to have to read all of those cards as if they were a kind of gospel. It was really it's a bizarre experience.
But it must be very different with an indie because, say, The Invitation, it's indie, obviously, to a point that word doesn't mean the same thing it used to because even big studio films often are
Yes.
called that. But
Yes.
to not really have to be able, I mean, maybe not in that case because it's a real budget, but people make, say, a $200,000 movie, they might not have to show it to anyone before it's released.
Oh,
it
sure.
might be like disappearing into the woods and coming back with
Totally.
a movie. Did you have to do any of that with The Invitation,
Well,
or is it just your
I
vision?
want to. I mean, I want to screen for people. I find it absolutely essential to get the movie up in front of people as many times as possible, actually. So I want to get the feedback. It's just it's about finding the patterns and finding the common threads in the feedback that help you figure out if you're actually communicating your story.
But feedback versus forced. So you're asking feedback versus the studio saying, we got that note, now you have to do it.
Absolutely.
Having no choice, yeah.
Sure. And there's it's just like, I guess it's just the most basic human psychology. If you say, I have a great idea and I want to be a part of this process, and I have the authority to make you execute this idea, it takes an actually really strong person to look at your version and look at the new version that incorporates their notes. It takes a certain kind of person to say, I actually think your version was better, or, I think my version doesn't work.
Right.
Can we keep talking? But it's a person with a lot of humility, and I feel like I'm actually pretty good at cultivating that person in myself, but I haven't met a ton of them in who've ended up being my executives.
Well, I mean, editors are usually that person. Editors are good with that. Molding and reshaping and taking
absolutely.
notes. And
sure.
It's interesting.
Now, you push, for the invitation, you push some boundaries with casting. Having both a homosexual couple and an interracial couple, which one of them, I know, right?
In the same movie?
One of those in a movie is like, whoa, that's definitely, kind of intense. But if you have two in the same movie, that's like unheard of in Hollywood.
And they went to Mexico.
And they went to Mexico.
Right.
Just in but I was wondering if those choices were in the original script, or you knew you wanted to do something that was kind of pushing the boundaries from the get-go, or was that just purely like they were the best people for the job, or if it was like intended from the beginning?
I mean, it was always intended that Tommy and Miguel were a couple. It was always intended that Miguel was Latino. It was always intended that Gina was Asian American. Kira was an interesting choice because I met with a lot of different kinds of actors, and there's just something about Emma Yahtzee, who plays Kira. There's just this like grounded quality to her that I just wanted to keep looking at her, listening to her, kind of engaging, because she's the character who has to watch so much and be watching Will. And so sometimes we look at her, and that's how we realize, is Will losing his mind? Like, is Will starting to spiral? So it's those moments where she, in a grounded voice, says, okay, we're leaving. Like, we got to get out of here. You're going off the deep end. That hooks the audience into sort of the reality of the night. And there's something about her that was just so interesting. And I thought there's something kind of interesting actually too about having them be an interracial couple, because it sort of it isolates Will even a little bit more. And I thought that was kind of it isolates them both actually, and it makes Kira a little bit more of an outsider, but also maybe the chorus or something that we have to watch the movie through her eyes as well as Will's.
Yeah, you get reflection because she's often not blank, but it's stoic.
Yeah.
Because she's taking it all.
I'd say it's mature. She was like the adult of the group, while everyone else was like seriously like a bunch of kids.
Yes.
She was the very mature one who seemed to know how to handle the situation.
Also, she's not, how you revert to being younger when you're around people you know well.
Absolutely.
From old days.
Totally.
And she's not one of them.
No.
So she can't have that same fun.
It's
not
true.
Like putting on old
She
jeans.
has to bring a little bit of reserve to the table.
Yeah. Now, obviously, the reception of that was on a critical level is obviously stellar. I remember early word coming from, I think it was Ryan Turek and friends of ours from South by. That was fantastic. What happens when it goes to that like bigger platform? What kind of release is it? Theatrical release? Does reviews still help get it out there, get the word out there? I mean, I'm so curious now what actually helps get people to see, because I remember when Cheap Thrills came out,
right?
I just think that's such fantastic. Drafthouse, film,
great
another
movie.
Great movie, and sometimes you're going like, how can not everyone be talking about this movie?
Right.
It dumbfounds me sometimes when there's a
great
movie out there.
I mean, I think that's the thing. It's highly possible that the invitation will get a lot of great reviews, and that can't ultimately translate into much on a theatrical level. I think reviews still matter. I mean, I think serious criticism still matters. I think that's sort of the issue is there serious criticism
online, right?
It's just it's a hard there's so much out there that it takes some time, I think, to actually really find the writers who are kind of coming from a more sophisticated perspective.
Well, yeah, movies can. I remember watching Eyes Wide Shut and not fully getting it, but liking it first day it was released, and then reading a Sight and Sound article maybe a year later made me fall in love with the movie just by reading an article, because it opened it up, talked about Freud, analyzed it, and you're like, oh. And that's something that's missing usually from online criticism, because it's not,
so much
because they don't
out
think
there.
you're going to read 10 pages, right? You're
Yeah,
going to
exactly.
read a blog,
Right.
and something shorter. Now, the XX film you're
I was
making, when you were working, I think his name's Dashiell Kane. How was it to work with such a talented, gifted 3-year-old. That's my son who was in your movie.
His child.
Are you kidding me?
I was going to save it for the
That's
show just to
so
fuck with you.
Funny. Oh my god.
Remember, he didn't do anything you guys wanted, and he had the claw hand, which is probably a spoiler. I assume he's going to get cut out of the movie anyway because it's a dream.
Nope, he's still in there.
He's in there. All right.
He's still in there.
I remember because
That is so funny.
Travis posted on his Facebook page the day before. Oh no, we need that
Yes,
person now. We're
yes.
freaking out. I was like, I guess I don't know if he'll last. And I remember he had to watch Caillou on a Kindle while they apply a hand to him for like an hour, and then finally the hand's on. And I remember what was interesting, and I'll try to say this without spoilers, but the actress who was in it was so so in her role that she wouldn't like play games with him. So he's dead to her, and I'm sitting there going, "Oh shit! I don't think this is the way to get the kid to do your scene." So I was it was hilarious, but
that is so funny.
I had to save that just on air because I wanted you to be surprised.
I love that. Because you were
I had to wrangle him.
You were hanging out in the background, but you were a very good wrangler because you didn't call attention to yourself.
Yeah, we're not stage parents. He's done a couple of those things for friends, and that's about it. But it will be. I can't wait to if he does appear, it's funny. But I don't know much about. I mean, I remember hearing it announced even a year before.
I know,
and we knew a couple of the people involved in that one.
Yeah, Jennifer is a friend. Ivanka's a really good friend. Yeah.
I think Ivanka's film is finished, and mine is finished. I don't know what's up with Jen's film. And then I think we're waiting on Annie Clark from St. Vincent, who is now making her own making films, and she has a film in it. So,
is there a connecting tissue besides the concept of all woman film? Like, was there anything you guys were mandated to connect them with? And
you know what's really funny is it's sort of like the material ended up connecting itself. I mean, I think the films are very different from what I understand, but there are like overriding anxieties about femaleness to a degree, and kind of about like sort of, I want to say body horror is a component. And I mean, it's funny, like my first idea I realized I couldn't do because I felt like there were too many, not similarities, like we were doing the same idea, but thematically we were treading in the same water. And so I was like, oh wow, I've got to shift gears
as the other films.
Yeah.
So you could see the other scripts.
So
you did
I was able to see I think 2. And so I was able to kind of figure out, all right, here's a direction that a couple of the films are taking or thematically, and I should move to a different area. But Todd Brown, I mean, he feels pretty certain that they'll end up being kind of natural thematic alignments.
That's actually kind of exciting to see what a weird psychological with nothing, instead of being forced to connect something with a story that's kind of weak, usually happens.
Yes.
To actually just see what happens if these people have no... I felt that way a little bit. I think I was on one of the VHS, I can't remember which one it was, because they're all male directors. And then people would say, oh, it's misogynist. So I think a lot of that just came blindly because these guys all... kind of, they don't realize the other guys are saying the same thing, but it's inside them. It's a lot of them were about misogyny, so you could call it misogyny. But I think there was more. This is something they're thinking about than just saying the piece. But the piece comes off misogynist because
they all are.
because it's uniform. Yeah,
They all
no, but it's true.
are.
Like once a voice is uniform, it feels that way.
That's really funny.
Which I thought was. I think it was the first VHS. I think they were all
it
about
is.
the same
No,
topic.
they are all.
Yeah, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So maybe it just happens. It's a weird gender bias.
Yeah.
I don't think I can solve that tonight.
Nope.
It's too much.
Nope.
What you mentioned the Babadook earlier in the show. What other genre films? What are some of the things that you've seen lately that kind of excite you, or because that's the thing is like for us, I think that's why we watch as many movies as we do, is because we're always trying to rekindle that feeling of like seeing something so out there that inspires us, and we're like, wow,
Chasing the Dragon.
Chasing the Dragon.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, what have you seen lately that's excited you or inspired you?
I mean, I needed to see Under the Skin more than once. I felt like I needed to.
Wow, I barely made it through it once.
Yeah, but
It's my favorite film of the decade.
He's a big fan.
Yeah.
It took
literally
me a
of the
while.
decade. I can't think of any other movie that I think about every day. I think of an image from it.
Yeah.
Just like, or that kid on the beach. I still am thinking about him. He's still there.
It's so
as far as I'm
powerful.
concerned,
It's
you know?
so.
I had a really tough time the first time I saw it, but I just
Yeah.
couldn't stop thinking about it.
And
that's
listening to it.
Yeah.
This oral side of that film.
Oh, beautiful.
Did you ever see Birth?
Oh, yeah.
Because that's a movie no one talked about, and when I go back and look at it, the style of that movie it's amazing.
Well, it's funny because even though it's not strictly a genre film, Bobby Shore, my DP, I mean, we had originally talked a lot about this, about Clute. as just a sort of visual reference. But when it came down to actually
For
shooting,
which film? Invitation? Or-
for The Invitation,
Yeah,
Bobby
I could
shot
see
The
that.
Invitation.
Yeah, the dark.
But ultimately, in terms of just sort of palette and kind of a sense of subtle shifts in palette, Bobby always used birth as his
interesting, yeah.
as his touchstone. And so, I mean, I feel like Jonathan Glazer is just really interesting generally.
Yeah.
And there's something about Under the Skin, though, that I felt like, what is it about this year where there's Under the Skin and then there's Lucy?
Yeah.
And they're two completely different movies, and yet both are these kind of attempts, I thought, serious attempts at a feminist statement from male filmmakers.
And at the exact same time, I remember that Under the Skin was in theaters. The Avengers, the second Avengers, was in theaters where she's playing this major superhero, and I remember just going, she kind of blew my mind, like what Scarlett Johansson was representing to all these different groups at that same time.
It's really true.
It was pretty fascinating.
But we put her on the cover of Fango for that month, and we got so much backlash.
That was the best
from
cover you
fans.
ever
I
did.
know.
Yeah, the
Most
people
beautiful
that
cover.
appreciated it really appreciated it, though.
Yeah, I mean, Glazer, there's a fascinating story. People talk about auteurs as writers who direct, and it really isn't. It's what he did, which is there's a book, and then that got adapted to a screenplay that he and this guy worked on for a few years, and then it kind of fell by the wayside. And then because it was a totally different thing. They were cannibals. She was farming bodies for this like body farm of aliens.
Right.
And then he comes back to it, reshapes it, and makes it the thing. He didn't know how to express it for a long time, and then finally figured it out, and it's like a mystery, and he solved it. That's
Did you
what
ever
it really
finish the
is.
book? I know you tried.
I got like 30 pages, and
it's very intellectual.
Very different. And I mean, I liked kind of what they're doing with her, but as soon as you go into the farming, I don't care.
Yeah.
I like the unexplainedness of seeing her seduce someone into darkness.
Oh, well, yeah, and having just like a guy sort of shimmying in utter blackness. And then walking into like a pool of oil or whatever.
You can say
it's
dancing
like
with an erection.
Yeah, but there was something so vulnerable about it, and I felt like there was something. I mean, watching it in a theater, knowing that there are a lot of people who are really there because they're going to get Scarlett Johansson naked on screen. I mean, the shock that that I felt among the audience members. I mean, obviously the male audience members who get the thing they think they want and then get something they really don't want.
Which is art, because she is not. You're not getting Scarlett Johansson.
No,
she's giving you what she's in control.
Oh, absolutely.
Like she is not that herself anymore.
Yeah,
she is playing the character.
She's like a
an
praying
alien.
mantis, and then
there's no emotion to it. It's so. Yeah, film's such an interesting art form in that way that she can actually control it. How is that possible? You know, she's on the screen.
I thought about that movie a lot and watched it more than once.
I just think of Birth as very like you were talking about Rosemary's Baby briefly, and I just remember when I saw it, I was like, oh my god, like that shot of her at the opera, and it's a slow zoom and her hair's cut short, and you're like, it's Polanski, this is Rosemary's Baby.
Yes.
It was pretty exciting.
Yes.
What other things, like contemporaries, like people who are making, do you stay afloat of like what people like Ty West and the Adam Wood, those people who are making these kind of movies, do they interest you, what's happening?
I mean, it does interest me, but I have to be honest, it's like I find myself probably not obsessively watching like horror careers. It's like I sort of hook into the fact that, Ty's made a couple of really or movies I think are interesting. You know, I recently on Sam Zimmerman's Shudder site, I chose House of the Devil as one of my top 5 off of their site, and I mean, I think I'm interested in careers that are allowed to sort of grow. And so for me, you know, when I think of somebody like Denis Villeneuve, who made Enemy, which to me feels like a kind of horror film.
We all talked. I loved the ending of that. It was terrifying. Oh my
god, it was so great. And
I don't think I've ever rewatched an ending of anything that many times in a row. Just trying to work it out of my brain.
Yes, and you know, he's really good at endings because like Prisoners too. It's just sort of like, that's a giant studio movie with Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal, and that's how you ended your movie, and you feel the palpable gasp in the audience, like. And that, I just feel like that, to be allowed to do that is sort of, I'm more interested in kind of thinking about, okay, how do I have a career like that, but how do I have a career for myself that's like interesting, varied, ambitious, I hope, filled with challenges. That's what I'm trying to sort of shape for myself.
And the best thing is to diversify it because, as much as horror fans will like to pigeonhole someone, all our favorite filmmakers who started in horror had to go. Sam Raimi goes off to make Spider-Man movies, comes back, makes Peter Jackson. All these people start the same way, and they come back to us.
I think Jim Mickle is really interesting, and I kind of feel like I'm drawn to people who seem to sort of see themselves as storytellers first, and they're just sort of drawn to dark instincts in all of us. And that seems interesting to me.
When you got out here to LA versus New York, versus the independent scene, which is a little more open to everyone, there's less of a bias because you're independently raising money. When you got into the actual studio model, did you notice what we see year after year with statistics about the tiny percentage of women in higher roles in filmmaking? Did you notice that palpably when you got out here? And did you ever have you ever had that challenge, or has it just been?
I mean, it's like it's a challenge, but I guess it's sort of like, it's a challenge, but I don't see it as a handicap. You know what I mean? And I think that can be the dangerous zone that this conversation takes when we sort of internalize our very humanity as females as somehow a ball and chain, right. Something we've got to get rid of, and because it sort of marks us or kind of makes it feel like so much harder. I'm sure there's if I stayed up and then really thought about it, looking up at the ceiling, I'd think, there's a lot of ways it's harder. But I have to sort of just put one foot in front of the other and just try to make change for myself. I feel like that's the only way change is going to happen, is if we can all figure out ways to just kind of beat the odds.
I always feel normalcy does that. I grew up seeing Jane Campion films very young because she was from New Zealand.
Yes.
And I saw Angel at My Table on TV.
Yes.
Because it was a TV production. And
one of my favorite movies of all time.
Angel at My Table?
Oh, my God. I love that movie so much.
So it's not weird. It's not strange that a woman made that. It's just the movie I saw. So,
yes.
And I feel like that in general, as those things change, people just get used to everything,
Yeah.
That's the hope, I guess.
I hope so. There is something about the numbers, the persistence of the numbers staying so low that's just really come on, people. And there are entire studios. There are certain studios that have just terrible track records.
Most of them less than 1%.
Yeah, and that is a personality thing. That is a boys' club kind of working, sort of attempting to kind of save the dinosaur of their species until it gets wiped out, and it will. But it just it's like a barbarian's cry for relevance, and
Can we come with you guys? I don't want to be with the old white guys.
You're the dinosaurs.
Don't lump me in with them. This is the exciting part, because this will be ending hopefully in a way maybe people were seeing this right after or watching the film before. But we're going to first push for people to see it in theaters.
Yes. I love that. Yes.
Now, where is that? Is it kind of just the LA, New York kind of?
No,
thing?
it's at the ArcLight in LA. It's at the IFC in New York. It's at a lot of the Denver. It's at the Drafthouse. So, in San Francisco, and the Drafthouse in Denver, and the Drafthouse in Austin, and in
Yonkers?
Houston. Not Yonkers. Yonkers does. I don't
we
think
have one in Virginia.
I don't think. Yeah. So I think it's going to take some time for it to kind of roll out. Yeah. I think it might only start in about 8 cities. But if you check out the Drafthouse website, they just give you the list of all the theaters, and we actually keep adding theaters. It's pretty great. I feel like hopefully some people will see it in the theater, because that's how it should be seen.
Yeah,
did Mondo just do a soundtrack release too?
They did a soundtrack album,
that's awesome.
and it's so beautiful, and it's a pretty freaky soundtrack, and it's just great. It's Mondo's fantastic. They did a beautiful, beautiful poster, and
I haven't even seen it yet, but I love soundtracks, and I saw it, and I'm like, I think I have to buy that.
You might have to. You might have to, because it's really great.
Yeah.
And I saw you've done a bunch of TV lately. There's a lot of different shows. I know there's a new show, Billions.
Yep.
Man in the Castle.
Oh, Man in the Castle? That's what do you have? Do you already kind of know what your next movie project, or is it everything's just starting and working towards it
You
again?
know, I mean, there are definitely some things that are on the table. Phil and Matt and I feel like we really know how to work as a team. And so we'd like to, there are a couple of like very specific LA stories that sort of traffic in this kind of crossbreeding of genre that The Invitation kind of works with. And so we're thinking we're going to make that happen for ourselves again. So they're working on something for me, which is a really nice feeling.
Cool.
Yeah.
So my recommendation is the Sacrament Invitation double feature. That's my only hint for the night, so enjoy it. It could be a fun program, but watch Invitation first.
I love it. I love it. Yes, thank you.
That's a good way to loop tie back in. Well, thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks so much for
really enjoyed
joining
the
us.
film.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and everybody check out The Invitation now. It's out now.
Thank
VOD
you.
theaters.
Thank you.
Go.
Go.
And show your kids a Eraserhead.
Yeah.
Because you'll have filmmakers to
Yeah,
thank.
exactly.